Contrary to her stunning looks, this fairy Hua of the heavenly fox race was an extremely ruthless and dangerous character. She had once sucked away the true yang essence of hundreds of young male demons, and for that, she was hunted down by the heavenly fox monarch himself for a long while, but still managed to escape with her life. With that harrowing past behind her, Taoist Master Myriad Bone naturally didn't dare to let others know that he was on friendly terms with this woman. Alright, now that we've had our first meeting with fellow Taoist Han, I'm going to go into seclusion for a few days. I recently attained some sudden enlightenment in my cultivation and wish to explore that further. It would be inconvenient for you to live here with me, so I'll have to ask you to leave, Taoist Master Myriad Bone said in a casual voice. You sure are a sly old Taoist priest. You're just scared that I'll go after your disciples. You're fabricating the excuse that it would be inconvenient for me to live here. Am I going to occupy the entirety of this massive space? Come to think of it, you've brought a few disciples with you who have decent aptitude. I've heard that you also brought along the sons and grandson that you adore the most. You better keep a close eye on them. The woman chuckled in a seductive manner before her body swayed, and she abruptly vanished on the spot. In the next instant, spiritual light flashed within the teleportation formation, and she reappeared inside the formation, having already reverted back to the appearance of Taoist Master Myriad Bone's concubine. Taoist Master Myriad Bone's face paled slightly upon hearing this, and he hurriedly summoned a silver badge before waving it toward the formation. A buzzing sound rang out from the teleportation formation, and the woman was instantly teleported away. Only then did Taoist Master Myriad Bone shake his head with a wry smile and depart from the scene. Meanwhile, Han Li had already returned to the 5th floor, and he was sitting by himself on the main seat in the hall, contemplating something in silence. He was trying to figure out what this Taoist Master Myriad Bone's intentions were. He naturally wasn't convinced that Taoist Master Myriad Bone had merely invited him in an attempt to befriend him with pure motives. Furthermore, the concubine that he had been holding had unleashed an extremely advanced illusionary technique to conceal her true appearance, which was rather suspicious. However, he didn't detect any ill intent from their speech and actions, which was why he had been content to converse with Taoist Master Myriad Bone for so long before departing. Besides, with his current powers, he could put up a good fight even against a late-body integration cultivator, so he had nothing to fear even if they did harbor some kind of ulterior motive. Additionally, the Black Realm Exchange Convention that they had mentioned was truly something that he was interested in attending. After all, he wasn't really banking on reaping much rewards from the Myriad Treasure Convention. Part of the reason why he had come here was to fulfill the agreement he had made with that demonic woman back in Deep Heaven City, and on top of that, he also wanted to take this opportunity to acquaint himself with other cultivators of the same caliber and see what the 3 sovereigns and 7 monarchs were like. He wanted to compare them to the holy grade beings he had encountered in the foreign races. If he could purchase a large amount of demon beast materials from the demonic woman and also reap many rewards during the Black Realm Exchange Convention, then there was a good chance that he would be able to gather all of the materials required to refine his second extreme mountain. If he could accomplish that, then he would have another immensely powerful treasure at his disposal, and with those 2 extreme mountains, it would also become an extremely easy task for him to transcend his first few major heavenly tribulations. On top of that, it seemed that he would be able to find a 3rd extreme mountain in the not-too-distant future as well. However, that would depend on whether his new in-name disciple could successfully cultivate her Ice Essence Glacial Soul ability. One of the 5 mountains required to refine the 5 extreme mountains was none other than the Vast Yin Glacial Soul Mountain. The vast yin stones that this mountain was comprised of were different from profound jade. It could only be found in an extreme glacial realm, but only after being stimulated by someone could it release glacial soul chi, which was extraordinarily cold. Such a mountain generally stood hundreds of thousands of feet beneath a glacier, and due to the vast amount of glacial chi around it, even Han Li's tremendously powerful spiritual sense wouldn't be able to detect it. Only those with the aforementioned ability would be able to sense the vast yin stones from afar. As for the range within which these vast yin stones could be sensed, that would depend on the size of the vast yin stones and the potency of the cultivator's Ice Essence Glacial Soul ability. The vast yin Glacial Soul Mountain that he was searching for was naturally extremely massive, and as long as one were to master the Ice Essence Glacial Soul ability, they would definitely be able to sense it even from hundreds of thousands of feet. Of course, Han Li had no idea whether such a mountain could be found. Thankfully, he knew of many extreme glacial realms in the human and demon territories alone. Compared to the other few types of extreme mountains, this one was the easiest to source, but it was still yet to be seen whether he could track down such a mountain. However, for the sake of his future major heavenly tribulations, Han Li naturally couldn't relinquish any shred of hope, which was why he had decided to save Bai Gyur without any hesitation after discovering her special physique. He possessed a vast amount of pills, so saving her wouldn't cause as huge a setback in his cultivation as it would for other cultivators of his caliber, but it would still definitely delay his cultivation for over 100 years. However, if he could refine the glacial soul extreme mountain and make some further advancements in his power, he could consider creating a clone of himself with restricted magic power to return to the human world. There were 2 places in the human world where sightings of Great North Essence lights had been made, so there was definitely a good chance that a Great North Essence mountain could be found there. As such, there was a good chance that he would be able to gather 4 of the 5 extreme mountains. If he were fortunate enough to gather the materials required for the last extreme mountain as well and refine all 5 extreme mountains, he most likely wouldn't have to worry about major heavenly tribulations for a very long time to come. With sufficient time, he was confident in his own ability to reach the grand ascension stage, and it certainly wasn't impossible for him to ascend to the true immortal realm eventually. And Li's expression remained calm and unchanged, but these thoughts were rapidly flashing through his mind. After a while, he stood up before making his way toward one of the side doors of the hall. His plan was to continue resting in the hall for the next 2 days, then pay Heavenly Yuan Holy Sovereign a visit to collect the ingredients required to brew red silk immortal wine. Seeing as he was planning to attend this Black Realm convention, it certainly wouldn't be a bad idea to refine some red silk immortal wine. If he were to encounter some extremely avid wine enthusiasts among the cultivators there, the wine would possess extremely high exchange value. Otherwise, even though he was carrying many treasures and spirit medicines, there really wasn't all that much that he could bring out for exchange. Myriad-year spirit medicines were indeed quite rare, but they weren't too precious in the eyes of body integration cultivators. As for the powerful treasures that he had, most of them were useful to him, so he couldn't just offer them for exchange. Thus, night slowly fell, and only when it had turned dark outside did young Master Hai and Qi Lingzi return in an excited manner. Han Li could sense that the 2 of them had appeared in the teleportation formation on the 1st floor, and he used his restriction badge to summon them to the 5th floor. After that, he issued some instructions to them, and even though they had a lot to say to him, they could only bite their tongues and return to their living quarters. 2 days later, Han Li paid a visit to Heavenly Yuan Holy Sovereign, who was staying in another immortal welcome palace, and secured a large amount of ingredients from him. What was slightly unfortunate was that the 2 demon monarchs, the Black Phoenix Monarch and Worm Monarch Li Huo, both had something to do, so they were no longer on 9 Immortal Mountain. It was most likely the case that they were only going to come back prior to the commencement of the Myriad Treasure Convention. Han Li was naturally slightly disappointed, but he didn't think too much of it as he was in a hurry to brew the immortal wine. Thus, he quickly took his leave from Heavenly Yuan Holy Sovereign's residence and returned to his own immortal welcome palace. He entered a secret chamber on the 5th floor, then began to brew red silk immortal wine according to the procedure detailed on the ancient tome. He stayed in the secret chamber for half a month without coming out even once. He naturally couldn't brew all of the red silk fruits that he had into wine, and aside from the 2 flagons he had promised Heavenly Yuan Holy Sovereign, he only brewed 7 more flagons beyond that. Han Li was well aware of the correlation between rarity and value. Even though this red silk immortal wine was wine of the true immortal realm and had never been seen in the spirit realm before, bringing out too much at once would still severely dent its value. Furthermore, consumption of this red silk immortal wine over an extended period of time could enhance one's constitution and extend one's lifespan, so Han Li was planning to drink it himself for a long time to come. After brewing the wine, Han Li continued to meditate and cultivate in the hall most of the time, and he would occasionally leave the 5th floor to meet and interact with the other body integration cultivators who had arrived. There were a few of them that he found to be quite enjoyable to interact with, and they established a close acquaintanceship. As for that Taoist master Myriad Bone, he was still as warm and hospitable toward Han Li as ever. He had even invited Han Li to attend a small private exchange convention that could only be attended by cultivators at or above the spatial tempering stage, and Han Li had secured some materials that he required during the event. This further improved Han Li's impression of Taoist master Myriad Bone, which had been quite positive to begin with. As time passed, more and more body integration cultivators began to move into the immortal welcome palaces, and around a month prior to the commencement of the Myriad Treasure Convention, the immortal welcome palaces had been mostly occupied. Among these body integration cultivators were grand elders from some major powers, as well as beings who ruled over a certain territory themselves, and there weren't that many vagrant cultivators like Han Li. However, aside from Heavenly Yuan Holy Sovereign, Mouse Monarch Dongtian was the only other one among the 3 sovereigns and 7 monarchs to arrive. However, this demon monarch immediately went into seclusion after moving into 9 Immortal Mountain, refusing to see anyone, thereby creating a sense of mystery and intrigue around him. Come to think of it, this mouse monarch Dongtian had always been the most enigmatic among the 7 demon monarchs. It was said that he was constantly using a secret technique to conceal himself, and very few people among the human and demon races had seen his true appearance. What was most bizarre was that barely anyone knew anything about his abilities. It seemed that this demon monarch never fought others in front of an audience, but the high-grade beings who had crossed him in the past had all disappeared from the 2 races one after another. No one could confirm whether he was behind all of this, but everyone knew that it was definitely not a good idea to mess with this mouse monarch Dongtian. This demon monarch was a member of the Jade mouse race, which held a very important position in the demon race. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to become one of the demon monarchs. After all, the demon race was different from the human race. Even if they were considered to be top-tier beings among the demon race, they still had to have sufficient backing before they could become demon monarchs. In contrast, power was generally passed down from generation to generation for the 3 human sovereigns. Han Li really wanted to go and meet this mouse monarch, but the latter clearly had no intention of seeing anyone, so he could only give up on this matter. Thus, during the remaining time, Han Li acquainted himself with more body integration stage cultivators, and also studied that strange disappearing spiritual root of young Master Hai's. Not only had he read many tomes for this, he had even asked young Master Hai to release some blood essence for further study. From his efforts, he managed to deduce a few murky possibilities. However, he would still have to observe young Master Hai for some time longer before he could ascertain the true nature of his spiritual root. During this time, Han Li was quite benevolent toward his 2 companions. Not only did he allow young Master Hai and Qi Lingzi to enter and exit the palace as they pleased, he also provided occasional guidance to them in their cultivation, which benefited them immensely. On this day, Han Li was explaining some aspects of a cultivation art to young Master Hai and Qi Lingzi, and just as he was about to take a sip of spirit tea, his expression suddenly stiffened slightly. Qi Lingzi reacted quite quickly and asked, "Is something wrong, Senior?" "You'll know what's going on soon," Han Li replied with furrowed brows. Young Master Hai and Qi Lingzi exchanged a slightly bewildered glance upon hearing this, but they didn't dare to press Han Li any further for answers, so they could only wait in silence. After a full 10 minutes had passed, a dull thump suddenly rang out from outside the palace. The entire ground beneath their feet and the surrounding walls then tremored slightly, and both young Master Hai and Qi Lingzi were given quite a fright as they cast their astonished eyes toward the door. Han Li remained still on his seat, but a slightly solemn look had also appeared on his face. One dull thump rang out after another, and tremors continued to run through the entire palace. It was as if there was some kind of gargantuan creature slowly approaching the immortal welcome palace. "What's going on, Senior Han?" Young Master Hai couldn't help but ask in a bewildered manner. "You 2 won't be able to sense anything here. Let me take you 2 to broaden your horizons." Han Li sighed before rising to his feet, then swept his sleeve toward the 2 of them. A burst of azure light immediately swept forth to encompass the trio, and they vanished as a streak of azure light. In the next instant, the 3 of them appeared in the teleportation formation before teleporting out of the 5th floor. The 3 of them then emerged from the teleportation formation on the 1st floor of the immortal welcome palace, then rose up into the air as a streak of azure light. After just a few flashes, the azure light faded, and the trio appeared on the summit of a tall mountain, where they were able to see everything within a radius of several thousand kilometers. Without the immortal welcome palace's restrictions acting as a buffer, the rumbling booms in the distance were even more earth-shattering. The entire 9 immortal mountain seemed to be quaking as a gargantuan being approached from the distance. What is that? It looks like a living walking piece of land. Qi Lingzi's jaw dropped straight to the ground as he cast his gaze into the distance. Young Master Hai blinked rapidly in an astonished manner, as if he were afraid that his eyes were playing tricks on him. It was no wonder that they were so astonished. There was currently an immeasurably massive mass of black land approaching them from afar, and the rumbling booms were emanating from directly beneath this unfathomably massive chunk of black land. This plot of land seemed to be extremely dry, and its surface was riddled with countless cracks, forming a series of extremely deep rifts and ravines. What was even more astonishing was that, at the center of the plot of land, was a tall and majestic black fortress, around which stood countless black-armored guards. They were standing in a completely still manner with cold expressions on their faces, and holding all types of long halberds and giant axes. There were also over 1,000 guards clad in bone armor atop giant blue wolf steeds flying in the air above the fortress, and they were none other than lightning guards. One group of guards stood in a stationary manner on the ground, while the other group of guards soared through the air, and the combination of the two created quite an intimidating sight to behold. All of a sudden, Han Li's eyes narrowed and blue light flashed through his pupils as he said, "I can see you, fellow Taoist. Why don't you come out to meet me?" An unfamiliar yet extremely pleasant female voice rang out from behind him in response. "As expected, my little tricks aren't enough to fool you, brother Han. Tusk, the tyrant sovereign spirit beast steed sure is massive. It most likely has something to do with the legendary transport spirit." Han Li's expression remained unchanged, but he was feeling slightly alarmed. With his immensely powerful spiritual sense, it was quite incredible that someone had managed to get so close to him before he finally noticed their presence. He slowly turned toward the one who had just spoken, and discovered there was a beautiful young woman in a 5-colored palatial dress, appraising him with a smile over 100 feet away. As Han Li swept his spiritual sense toward her, a hint of befuddlement appeared in his eyes. "Greetings, fellow Taoist Han, my name is Liu Qing. As I'm sure you've already noticed, this is just a puppet clone of mine, rather than my true body," the young woman said in a composed manner as she extended a curtsy toward Han Li. "Liu Qing, I've heard that the former heavenly spirit sovereign had a pair of trusted subordinates, one of whom excelled in the art of puppetry while the other was adept in disguise techniques. Among them, the former is known as Liu Qing or Fairy Thousand Spirit. Could that be you?" Han Li asked with a contemplative look in his eyes. "I'm truly flattered that you know of me, fellow Taoist Han. I should have attended such a grand occasion in person, but I've reached a critical juncture in my cultivation of a secret technique, so I'm unable to leave my secret chamber. As such, I had no choice but to send this puppet clone in my stead. Thankfully, this clone of mine has built up somewhat of a reputation for itself and was allowed to enter this place." The woman spoke in a calm and graceful manner, and Han Li's expression changed slightly upon verifying her identity. This Fairy Thousand Spirit was only a subordinate to Heavenly Spirit Sovereign, but it was said that she possessed outstanding aptitude in the art of puppetry. On top of that, her skills in that area had drastically improved even further after she pledged her allegiance to Heavenly Spirit Sovereign. She was renowned as the second most proficient human in the puppetry arts, second only to the Heavenly Spirit Sovereign himself, who excelled in both puppetry and illusionary techniques. This Fairy Thousand Spirit and Heavenly Spirit Sovereign's other trusted subordinate had been won over by Heavenly Spirit Sovereign's abilities, and were therefore willing to pledge their allegiance to him. Even though this was only a puppet, Han Li could tell that it was most likely not inferior in power to a late spatial tempering stage being. As such, even though he was rather surprised that this Liu Qing seemed to recognize him, he immediately cupped his fist in a salute and said, "Apologies for my rudeness, Fairy Thousand Spirit. In regard to the transport spirit you just referred to, could this be the ancient divine tortoise that's able to carry Xuan Wu City on its back?" Indeed, the transport spirit is a giant beast that has inherited the bloodline of the true spirit Xuan Wu, and I was fortunate enough to have been able to see it in person. Its sheer size is so astounding that no one would dare to oppose it. On top of that, it's also proficient in powerful water and earth attribute abilities, and its defenses are so powerful that even the average divine spirit treasure wouldn't be able to leave a single scratch on it. This giant beast in front of us is most likely only one of the descendants of that tortoise, Liu Qing chuckled. "This is only one of its descendants. Han Li couldn't help but draw a sharp breath as he turned back to the massive plot of approaching land. That's right, the true transport spirit is more than 10,000 times larger than this creature, Liu Qing replied with an earnest nod. I'm very intrigued to see this transport spirit for myself now, Han Li mused as he cast his gaze into the distance. It won't be easy to witness that giant beast. At the time, I traveled to Xuanwu City as part of the Spirit Sovereign's entourage, and it was only through sheer luck that I managed to catch a glimpse of the creature from afar. Once every 3,000 years, the giant tortoise emerges to absorb the essence of the sun and the moon, and I was fortunate enough to be present at the time. Otherwise, it spends most of its time with its body mostly buried in the earth, and its limbs and head are also retracted back into its shell as it hibernates. I see my eyes have truly been opened, Han Li said as he cupped his fist in a salute toward Liu Qing with a slightly wistful look in his eyes. Young Master Hai and Qi Lingzi were completely enraptured by their conversation, and they were clearly filled with yearning toward this unfathomable world inhabited by these truly powerful beings. When the giant beast in the distance was still several tens of kilometers away from the Nine Immortal Mountain, it finally drew to a halt, and the tremors running through the ground abruptly ceased. Right at this moment, the giant plot of land slowly rose up from the ground, transforming into a giant black mountain that was tens of thousands of feet tall in mere moments. Faint tremors emanated from the bottom of the black mountain again, and an enormous head emerged from the soil before casting its gaze toward the nearby spectating cultivators, which naturally included Han Li and Liu Qing. Han Li focused his gaze on the head of the creature to find that it was extremely intimidating in appearance. There were a dozen or so curved horns of different sizes on its head, and the vulnerable points on its neck were all covered by thick black scales. The giant beast also had a remarkably long mouth, and as it opened its mouth, a pungent odor swept forth while rows of giant sharp teeth were revealed. Han Li looked on at the creature's sharp teeth, and he estimated that it would take hundreds of someone of his size to provide an ample mouthful for this creature to devour. Qi Lingzi was quite a courageous character, but even his face had paled slightly at the sight of this ferocious gargantuan beast. Meanwhile, young Master Hai was looking back and forth between the creature and his own body. Qi Lingzi asked in a curious manner, "What are you doing?" "I'm just comparing to see if I'm as big as one of that thing's teeth," young Master Hai replied, leaving Qi Lingzi feeling completely speechless. Han Li's lips also twitched slightly upon hearing young Master Hai's response. This guy really had been born to be a comedian. The giant tortoise suddenly let loose an earth-shattering roar before withdrawing its head and limbs into the ground again, and the giant black mountain it had transformed into immediately fell still. Only then did the black-armored guards around the fortress spring into action. The lightning guards in the air descended into the fortress, while the black-armored guards formed teams and rose up into the air, pulling out a series of formation tools as they completed various tasks around the Black Mountain. Moments later, layers of restrictions had been set up around the mountain, and a layer of black mist permeated forth to completely conceal the fortress on it. After that, the black-armored guards immediately rushed into the black mist and vanished. Everything within the mist fell silent, creating a stark contrast with the massive commotion that had been caused earlier. Right at this moment, a dragon's roar rang out from another mountain, and a streak of golden light shot forth before arriving in the air above the black mist after just a few flashes. The golden light faded, and a shimmering golden worm was revealed with a single horn that was over 100 feet in length on its head. A smiling white-robed man stood on the back of the golden worm. It was none other than Heavenly Yuan Holy Sovereign. "Long time no see, fellow Taoist Xuanwu. Care for a reunion?" "HMPH, just come in if you want to see me, you old geezer. I'm sure a mere illusionary formation won't be enough to keep you out." A cold voice responded from within the black mist, and the owner of the voice wasn't making any effort to be respectful or polite toward Heavenly Yuan Holy Sovereign. "He, I'll help myself then." Heavenly Yuan Holy Sovereign chuckled, seemingly completely unbothered by the animosity being directed at him. He tapped his foot onto the back of his golden worm steed, and it immediately vanished into the black mist as a ball of golden light. The black mist then fell silent once again. All of the spectating body integration cultivators knew that nothing more would come of this, so they all returned to their living quarters. Han Li naturally harbored the same intentions, and he cupped his fist in a salute to Liu Qing to bid her farewell. To his surprise, before he could say anything, Liu Qing suddenly smiled and said, "If you don't mind, I'd like to invite you to my humble abode, fellow Taoist Han. There is an acquaintance of yours who would like to see you." An acquaintance of mine. Han Li was rather surprised to hear this. Indeed, she's actually the descendant of an old friend of mine, and I just so happened to encounter her during my journey here, so I brought her to the immortal Welcome Palace with me. As for exactly who it is, you'll know when you get there, Liu Qing replied with a smile. You're really piquing my curiosity, Fairy Liu. In that case, please pardon my intrusion, Han Li said, and even though his expression remained unchanged, there were many thoughts flashing through his mind at once. I'm glad to hear that you're willing to come, fellow Taoist Han. I live on the level directly above yours. There's nothing more to see here, so let's go back together, Liu Qing said with a smile, and based on visual information alone, it was impossible to tell that she was actually a puppet. It was no wonder that she was renowned as the second most proficient puppetry master in the human race. Just this extremely lifelike puppet alone was sufficient testament to her abilities. Now that Heavenly Spirit Sovereign had passed away, she would naturally inherit his status as the most proficient puppetry master among all humans. Henley nodded in response before turning to young Master Hai and Qi Lingzi as he instructed, "You too, take this restriction badge and go back first." The two of them naturally accepted this instruction in a respectful manner. After that, Han Li departed with Liu Qing toward the immortal Welcome Palace down below. Not long after that, Han Li encountered a white-robed young woman who appeared to be around 16 to 17 years of age in a green hall on the 6th floor of the immortal Welcome Palace. A hint of surprise appeared on Han Li's face at the sight of the young woman. "Fellow Taoist Yi." Yi Ying pays her respects to Senior Han. "I didn't think that you would have progressed to the body integration stage since we separated in the Wood Tribe," Yi Ying said with a complex look on her face as she extended a curtsy toward Han Li. "I must say, I'm quite surprised to see you here, Fairy Yi Ying." A smile appeared on Han Li's face, and he swept a sleeve through the air to send forth a burst of invisible force that prevented Yi Ying from sinking down into her curtsy. At the same time, he swept his spiritual sense toward her and discovered that she had already reached the early spatial tempering stage. As expected of a member of the Yi family who possessed the heavenly phoenix bloodline, her rate of cultivation far exceeded that of the average cultivator. The heavenly phoenix true blood that Han Li had obtained was from her, so he was reflexively more polite toward her. "My mother is good friends with Aunt Liu, and she implored Aunt Liu to take me here with her," Yi Ying explained with a smile. "There's no need to place me on such a pedestal, Yinger. Your mother and I are as close as sisters. I was more than willing to bring you along with me," Liu Qing chuckled. Yi Ying naturally expressed her gratitude toward Liu Qing again upon hearing this. After a brief moment of contemplation, Han Li's smile suddenly faded as he said, "I assume you didn't ask Fairy Liu to bring me here just because you wanted to meet me, right?" Yi Ying faltered slightly upon hearing this before a slightly embarrassed look appeared on her face. "That is indeed true, Senior. I'll leave you two to discuss this matter on your own, then," Liu Qing said in a thoughtful manner before turning to leave. "Please wait, Aunt Liu. This actually has something to do with you as well, so there's no need for you to leave," Yi Ying hurriedly said. A slightly surprised look appeared on Liu Qing's face as she stopped before turning back to Yi Ying. "Oh, in that case, I'll also stay and listen to what you have to say." Han Li stroked his chin, and an intrigued look also appeared on his face. Yi Ying paused momentarily as a serious look appeared on her face, and she continued, "I have two things that I have to discuss with the two of you, one of which won't have much to do with Senior Han, but it'll be very much related to Aunt Liu." Oh, Liu Qing's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. "Aunt Liu, I heard that you've been in seclusion ever since the Spirit Sovereign passed away. Does this mean you've already made a decision to contest for the newly vacated Spirit Sovereign berth?" Yi Ying asked. Liu Qing's expression changed slightly, and only after a short while did she nod in admission. "Indeed, I've already mastered the former Spirit Sovereign's puppet secret techniques and refined several extremely powerful puppets. If I can make further improvements in my powers during my time in seclusion, I should be able to combat even late body integration cultivators, so I naturally intend to put my name forward." Her voice wasn't very loud, but she seemed to be quite confident. Yi Ying said in a serious manner, "My mother has asked to relay a message to you. Do not contest for the birth of Spirit Sovereign no matter what. If you secure the position, it will only bring you misfortune." "Is that so? I'm aware that your mother is an extremely intelligent and talented individual, but how can she possibly see into the future? Could it be that she received some news about the matter? Liu Qing was immediately able to deduce something upon hearing this. Your wisdom is truly unmatched, Aunt Liu. I haven't even revealed everything yet, and you've already guessed the general gist of things. Senior Han, I ask that you keep what I'm about to say next a secret, Yi Ying said as she suddenly turned to Han Li. Han Li could tell from her cautious display that she was going to say something quite important, so he nodded in response without any hesitation. I promise that I definitely won't reveal to anyone what you're about to say next. Yi Ying nodded in a content manner upon hearing this before continuing. Perhaps Senior Han may not know about this, but I'm sure that Aunt Liu has heard about how the devilish tribulation is going to descend upon our spirit realm within the next 1,000 years. A hint of fear flashed through her eyes as she spoke, and Liu Qing's expression darkened slightly, but she seemed to have already been aware of this. In contrast, Han Li was quite alarmed by this devilish tribulation. It was no wonder that he was oblivious to this. All of the other body integration cultivators of the human race had been at the body integration stage for thousands of years, so they naturally had some avenues through which they had been made aware of this. However, Han Li had only been back in human territory for several years, and hadn't yet had a chance to acquaint himself with many other body integration cultivators, so he naturally knew nothing about the imminent devilish tribulation. After all, information surrounding the devilish tribulation was only circulating among body integration cultivators, and it was kept confidential from all other cultivators, in case the human and demon races were plunged into turmoil by this news before the devilish tribulation even struck. Han Li naturally knew what this devilish tribulation was from the tomes he had read in the human race, but never did he think that it was going to strike within the next 1,000 years. Could it be that he really was simply this unlucky? Several centuries ago, he had encountered an attack on Deep Heaven City from an army of foreign races that took place once every several tens of thousands of years, and now he was about to face something even more perilous. He was finally beginning to understand why so many major powers were eager to recruit him and offer him such alluring conditions. If it weren't for the fact that he was extremely averse to having his freedom restricted by others, he would have been very tempted by a few of the major powers that had approached him. Could it be that this devilish tribulation has something to do with the birth of the spirit sovereign? Han Li asked. Indeed, Senior Han. On this occasion, whoever inherits the position of the spirit sovereign will be in grave danger in the upcoming devilish tribulation. Aunt Liu, as you know, my grandmother was one of Senior Mo Jianli's in-name disciples, and even after she became the leader of our Yi family, she still regards Senior Mo as her master. Several years ago, Senior Mo suddenly came to our Yi family while carrying injuries, and only after speaking with my grandmother for a day and a night did he depart. Liu Qing drew a sharp breath upon hearing this. What did you say? Senior Mo Jianli was carrying injuries. That's impossible. What in this realm could possibly harm him? Unless... Liu Qing's voice trailed off as a thought occurred to her. Han Li had naturally also heard of this grand ascension stage human being, and he was slightly alarmed to hear this as well. Looks like you figured it out, Aunt Liu. Not long ago, Senior Mo used the power of the star disk to forcibly open up an inter-realm passageway to the devil realm, hoping to conduct some reconnaissance on the elder devil race prior to the arrival of the devilish tribulation. Unfortunately, he was discovered by two holy patriarchs of the elder devil race and was forced to battle them. Thankfully, Senior Mo had been quite cautious and borrowed a powerful life-saving treasure from that patriarch of the demon race, and that treasure allowed him to escape back into our spirit realm without too many mishaps. That's already a massive silver lining on this dark cloud, Yi Ying explained. Senior Mo traveled to the elder devil realm. I've been in seclusion for these past few years, so I had no idea about this. Why did Senior Mo do something so dangerous? If I recall correctly, he didn't do anything like this prior to the last devilish tribulation, Liu Qing said with tightly furrowed brows. Senior Mo didn't elaborate much on that, but he seemed to have been clued in somehow that this devilish tribulation was going to be far more perilous than all of the previous ones, and both of our races could be wiped out if we're not careful. That's why Senior Mo took the risk to venture into the elder devil realm, and even though he didn't stay there for long, he did discover some extremely dangerous signs. As such, he came to our Yi family as soon as he returned from the elder devil realm and asked for some heavenly phoenix true blood, which he was going to use to refine an extremely powerful treasure to combat this devilish tribulation. Otherwise, our Yi family would also be oblivious to just how perilous this devilish tribulation is going to be, Yi Ying said with a resigned expression. Both Han Li and Liu Qing were very alarmed at this point. Han Li suddenly asked, "Did Senior Mo ever mention exactly what he saw in the Elder Devil realm?" "I'm afraid I don't know anything about that. My grandmother spoke to everyone in our family about this once, and perhaps my mother knows more than I do, but this is all of the information that I have on the matter. On this occasion, my mother sent me out specifically to caution Aunt Liu and a few other seniors that our family is close with not to contest for the position of the spirit sovereign. It seems that the first few passageways that will be opened up between the Elder Devil realm and the Spirit realm will appear near the Atlas sentient tree in the Tianling region. As such, the Spirit Sovereign's holy city will most likely be the most prominent target for the Elder Devil race on this occasion. Once the devilish tribulation strikes, the three sovereigns are strictly prohibited from abandoning their cities. Aside from that, Senior Mo Jianli and those on the Holy Island also intend to make the Heavenly Spirit city bait to lure the Elder Devil race and whittle down their army as much as possible using the power of the Atlas sentient tree and the many restrictions in the city, thereby alleviating the pressure on the rest of the human race. Hence, the new Spirit Sovereign's duty will be to guard the front lines against the Elder Devil race army, and retreat is not an option. I'm sure I won't have to elaborate on just how dangerous a task that'll be, Yi Ying said with a wry smile. Liu Qing and Han Li exchanged a slightly bewildered glance upon hearing this. After a long pause, Liu Qing finally sighed. This is indeed shocking news. It seems that Senior Mo's trip into the Elder Devil realm will allow our human race to better prepare against the devilish tribulation. I take back what I said earlier. Senior Mo has truly done our human race a great service by making this perilous trip. Thank your mother in my stead for providing me with this information, Yinger. Otherwise, if I were to inherit the position of the Spirit Sovereign, I would most likely have to perish alongside Heavenly Spirit City. Han Li was also feeling quite fortunate that he had been present to hear this news. After all, he had also been interested in contesting for the position of the Spirit Sovereign. It was clear that the Yi family didn't think that a new body integration cultivator like him would be striving toward the position of the Spirit Sovereign, so this information was meant solely for Liu Qing. Yi Ying hadn't kept this from him clearly as she wanted to thank him for assisting her during their journey to the Wood Tribe several centuries ago. He hadn't learned too much from this, but at the very least, he had been made aware that the next devilish tribulation was imminent, and that it was going to be extremely perilous, which was quite alarming to him. He had originally planned to take his time in executing his plans, but it seemed that he would have to make some adjustments. Before Han Li and Liu Qing had a chance to process this shocking news, Yi Ying suddenly smiled and said, "I've revealed everything I know about this matter. I'll move on to the second topic now. I'm here on behalf of my mother to invite Aunt Liu and Senior Han to become guest grand elders of our Yi family." Guest grand elder. Yinger, didn't your mother tell you that I only pledged my allegiance to the Spirit Sovereign as he had shown me great kindness on several occasions in the past, and I had no other way to repay him? I've finally regained my freedom, and I have no intention of being restricted by anyone else. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been tempted to contest for the position of the Spirit Sovereign at only the mid-body integration stage. Liu Qing shook her head to turn down this invitation without any hesitation. My mother is naturally aware of this, but she wanted me to pass on another message to you. If you're still unwilling to accept the offer after that, then my mother definitely won't force the issue any further, Yi Ying said with a mysterious smile. Liu Qing faltered slightly upon hearing this before smiling as she said, "Oh, he, it seems your mother is still as mischievous as she was when we had last met so many years ago. Go on then, I'll listen to what you have to say." Thus, Yi Ying's lips tremored as she transmitted her voice to Liu Qing, and Han Li looked from the side with a curious look in his eyes. Moments later, Liu Qing's smile stiffened, and her cheeks suddenly became quite flushed. "Is that true? Your mother isn't deceiving me, is she?" The calm and collected Liu Qing had completely lost her composure, and even her voice was trembling slightly. "I can assure you that it's true. My mother knows that you've been regretting this ever since it happened all those years ago. This is a rather perilous juncture, but it's still quite a significant opportunity. As long as you're willing to join our Yi family, we're willing to assist you with all our power," Yi Ying assured in an affirmative manner. "All right, I'll join your Yi family. Even if there were only a sliver of a chance, I definitely wouldn't give up on it, let alone such a significant opportunity," Liu Qing immediately agreed, and her face had become extremely pale. "That's great. You'll be able to live with my mother, and I'll be able to consult you about some puppetry secret techniques now," Yi Ying said with an elated smile. However, Liu Qing was clearly still reeling from what she had heard, and she could only just barely muster up a smile for Yi Ying in response. "What is your verdict, Senior Han?" Yi Ying turned to Han Li in an expectant manner. "I've already refused so many invitations, so I naturally have no intention of joining the Yi family either," Han Li replied without making any attempt to mince his words. "I had thought that you would change your mind after hearing about the imminent devilish tribulation. In that case, my mother also has a message for you. If you still aren't willing to change your mind after hearing it, then just forget I ever extended this offer," Yi Ying insisted. "Oh, go on then," Han Li said as he raised an eyebrow with a hint of a smile on his face. He had no ties in the spirit realm, so he was convinced that she wouldn't be able to say anything that would change his mind. "Senior Han, have you heard of our Yi family's grass soul pill and our great nirvana Holy Spirit secret technique?" Yi Ying asked. Naturally aware of the vastly renowned grass soul pill, this is one of the few types of pills in our human race that can enhance the magic power of even body integration cultivators, and from what I've heard, your Yi family very rarely brings out these pills for sale. At the very least, I haven't seen them in any market I've visited. As for this great nirvana Holy Spirit secret technique, it's the first time I've heard of such a thing," Han Li said after a brief pause for contemplation. "In that case, I won't elaborate on the function of the grass soul pills. As long as you agree to join our Yi family, my mother is willing to offer you 30 of these pills at once. I'm sure they'll be of great assistance to you when you attempt a breakthrough to the mid-body integration stage in the future. As for the great nirvana Holy Spirit art, a woman from our Yi family with the heavenly phoenix bloodline, and a man must use the technique together to make full use of it. This technique has no other function, but it can stimulate a cultivator's latent potential and gradually refine their physical constitution. When cultivated to the final stage, one would attain an ability similar to an immortal body that would allow one to rise from the ashes like a phoenix." For some reason, a faint blush had appeared on Yi Ying's face as she spoke. Han Li was rather tempted to hear this potential prospect of attaining an immortal body. If he were to completely master his provenance true devil arts in the future, one of his greatest assets in battle would be his close-quarters combat abilities. If he could attain an immortal body as well, that would enhance his powers significantly. However, why did Yi Ying have such a strange expression on her face? Han Li couldn't help but appraise her in a slightly befuddled manner. Liu Qing faltered slightly upon hearing Yi Ying's words before turning to Han Li, then turning back to look at Yi Ying, and she suddenly burst into laughter. "Yinger, if fellow Taoist Han agrees to join your Yi family, you'll be the one assisting him in cultivating the great nirvana Holy Spirit art, right? That makes sense considering fellow Taoist Han is a body integration cultivator. The average member of the Yi family most likely won't have phoenix bloodlines of sufficient purity to cultivate the art to the desired effect. I had heard that there are a lot of people in this generation of the Yi family, but very few of them have truly inherited the heavenly phoenix true blood. Fellow Taoist Han seems to have always been alone, so he'd be a perfect candidate," Liu Qing said in an amused manner as she temporarily cast aside her own train of thought. "That, I wouldn't know about that. That'll depend on whether fellow Taoist Han will be willing to join our Yi family, and even if he is, my mother will have to make that final decision." Yi Ying's blush had deepened even further, and she was tripping over her own words slightly. Liu Qing merely smiled and remained silent. Han Li certainly wasn't an idiot, and he immediately came to realize that this great nirvana Holy Spirit art was a dual cultivation art. From Yi Ying's awkward display, it was quite likely the case that she would be the one to cultivate this technique with him if he were to join the Yi family. Han Li found this to be slightly awkward as well, but his expression remained calm, and after a brief moment of contemplation, he shook his head in response. "I appreciate the kind offer from your Yi family, but I've already decided not to bind myself to any particular power, so I'll have to turn you down." Yi Ying seemed to be quite relieved to hear Han Li's refusal, but there was a hint of disappointment deep in her eyes as well. However, she quickly cast those emotions aside and said, "In that case, I won't make any further mention of this. However, would you be willing to accept another exchange? We would like you to lend us your assistance once in 10 years in exchange for a reward." A wry smile appeared on Han Li's face upon hearing this. "Are you referring to the True Spirit ceremony that'll be held in 10 years? You already know of this, Senior Han. Could it be?" Yi Ying reacted very quickly, and a thought immediately occurred to her. Indeed, you were one step too late, I'm afraid. I've already made an agreement with Fairy Xiao Feng to assist the Gu family during the True Spirit ceremony, Han Li explained with a slightly resigned look on his face. The Gu family? That won't be an issue then. The Gu family has always been on extremely good terms with our Yi family, so we won't have to contend with you during the ceremony, Yi Ying said with a relieved expression. I see, I'm glad to hear that. Han Li nodded as a hint of a smile appeared on his face. Yi Ying had said everything she had to say, so Han Li naturally wasn't going to linger much longer. Thus, after making conversation for a short while, he took his leave in a polite manner and departed. Liu Qing and Yi Ying both accompanied him to the teleportation formation, and after Han Li vanished amid a flash of spiritual light, Liu Qing heaved a forlorn sigh. What a pity. What do you mean by that, Aunt Liu? Yi Ying was rather befuddled to hear this. I'm naturally referring to the fact that your mother wasn't able to recruit this man into the Yi family. He managed to reach the body integration stage at such a young age. If he can survive the imminent devilish tribulation, he'll have an immeasurable future ahead of him. Body integration cultivators stand at the pinnacle of the human race, but my grandmother is already a mid-body integration cultivator. If she were to use her heavenly phoenix bloodline as well, she would even be able to contend with late body integration stage beings. Now that you've also joined our Yi family, it's not all that important whether Senior Han joins us or not. Regardless of whether it's the imminent True Spirit ceremony or the devilish tribulation in the future, we should have more than enough power to protect ourselves. Besides, with the conditions offered by our Yi family, I'm sure we'll be able to recruit other vagrant body integration cultivators. Yi Ying replied, seemingly in a nonchalant manner, but it was quite clear that she was still feeling rather indignant about Han Li's indirect rejection. Perhaps, your mother is most likely only holding him in such high regard for his potential. However, this fellow Taoist Han gives me a very peculiar feeling. It's as if the conditions you offered really weren't all that tempting to him at all. It's a pity that only this puppet clone of mine is here. If my true body were present, I could invite him to a sparring match to test out his abilities, Liu Qing said with a contemplative look in her eyes. What's there to test out? He's only recently progressed to the body integration stage, so there's no way he'll be a match for you. On top of that, I heard from my mother that prior to passing away, Heavenly Spirit's sovereign passed on several of his most powerful puppets to you, so your powers are most likely not inferior to the likes of the 3 sovereigns and 7 monarchs, right, Aunt Liu? Yi Ying said with a wide grin. Liu Qing's expression changed slightly upon hearing this before she shook her head with a wry smile. Your Yi family sure is good at securing obscure information. Not many people know about this. I didn't think that your mother would be one of them. I really must commend your Yi family on that. Yi Ying merely chuckled and remained silent. Meanwhile, Han Li had returned to the 5th floor, and after issuing some instructions to young Master Hai and Qi Lingzi, he immediately entered the secret chamber in the hall before taking a seat with his legs crossed. He had originally thought that he would be able to take his time in his cultivation now that he had reached the body integration stage, but after hearing about the imminent devilish tribulation, he had naturally changed his mind. He had to change his plans for the next several centuries in order to make himself more powerful as quickly as possible, thereby minimizing his chances of perishing in this devilish tribulation. After all, many of the 3 sovereigns and demon monarchs had perished during the last devilish tribulation, and this one was apparently going to be even more fierce and difficult to endure. What made Han Li even more concerned was that he had once crossed sacred ancestor Yuan Cha of the Elder Devil realm back when he was in the human world. One of her spiritual sense clones had descended into the human world and had been devoured by Silvermoon. The sacred ancestors of the Elder Devil realm were the equivalent of Grand Ascension cultivators in the human race, and if Yuan Cha were to descend into the spirit realm during the devilish tribulation, there was a good chance that she would hunt down Han Li herself or send out her subordinates to do so. As such, he had to elevate his cultivation base to the late body integration stage prior to the arrival of this devilish tribulation. Only then would he be able to ensure his own survival in the devilish tribulation, and with his vast array of powerful abilities and treasures, he would be able to put up a fight even against the sacred ancestors of the Elder Devil race. However, through the conversations he had with other body integration cultivators, he had learned that making progress after reaching the body integration stage was far more difficult even than what he had envisioned. Normal early body integration cultivators would often spend thousands or even tens of thousands of years just to make a breakthrough, and there were many who never made this breakthrough and simply perished during a major heavenly tribulation. As for those who were able to progress to the late body integration stage, those were even more uncommon. Even the past and present 3 sovereigns and 7 monarchs weren't all at the late body integration stage. Furthermore, he was on a very tight schedule. Thankfully, he had those spirit medicines that he had sourced from the vast glacial realm, which would allow him to refine a large amount of pills that would enhance his magic power, even at the body integration stage. This would allow him to cultivate at several times the efficiency of the average cultivator, and it shouldn't be a difficult task for him to accumulate sufficient magic power during the next few centuries. Thus, the only issue that stood in his path was actually breaking through the bottlenecks. Even after consuming so many spirit medicines that could enhance one's spiritual root, his aptitude was still not much better than that of the average cultivator. Perhaps his only option was to prepare some more things that could forcibly stimulate him to make breakthroughs. At the very least, he could look forward to that spirit void pill that he had finessed, as well as the divine infernal river elixir promised to him by Qing Yuanzi. With that in mind, Han Li's heart was eased slightly, following which a thought suddenly occurred to him. He flipped his hand over to summon a black spirit beast bracelet before injecting his spiritual sense into it, upon which his brows furrowed slightly. Within the space inside the bracelet was a hibernating little lac monkey. It was none other than the weeping soul beast. Ever since it had slain that heavenly devilish monarch, it had been hibernating in this spirit beast bracelet. Otherwise, with the incredible powers that it had displayed in the past, it would undoubtedly be a huge asset to Han Li when facing powerful enemies. Thankfully, he still had some time before the devilish tribulation arrived, and he was sure that it wouldn't hibernate for 1,000 years. With that in mind, Han Li stowed the spirit beast bracelet away in a flash before producing the shimmering golden myriad sword artwork. He flicked his wrist and had tossed it forward, upon which it slowly unfurled before hovering in a stationary manner before him. The sword observation art hidden within this artwork was an incredible ability. He had only gleaned a small portion of it, and that had been enough to significantly enhance the power of his azure coil sword formation. If he could master it in its entirety, it would definitely give him an enormous power boost. He had already come into contact with many body integration cultivators at this point, and even though most of them were vagrant cultivators or cultivators who belonged to sects or major families, that was enough. Some opportunities would have to arise to facilitate meetings with the likes of the 3 sovereigns and 7 monarchs. In particular, even though Han Li had never seen Wolf Monarch Tian Kui, he still couldn't help but feel rather frustrated and displeased at the thought of Silvermoon. He didn't know how Silvermoon was now that she had returned to the spirit realm for so many years and reverted back to her identity as demonic concubine Ling Long. As a concubine of Wolf Monarch Tian Kui, perhaps she would appear during the Myriad Treasure Convention, in which case he may be able to meet her. However, Han Li was then struck by a sense of melancholy as he recalled back to the complex gaze she had cast toward him prior to their separation. He was no longer an ignorant little boy at the time, so he could naturally see the emotions that her eyes had held. He and Silvermoon had been companions for so many years, surviving life and death ordeals together, and it was naturally impossible for him to say that he had no feelings whatsoever toward her. However, at the time, he was only a nascent soul cultivator, so he couldn't change anything. He had since arrived in the spirit realm and reached the body integration stage, but so many years had passed. Was Silvermoon still the same Silvermoon? Han Li didn't know the answer to that, and he didn't want to think too much about it in case it affected his mental state. It took him a long while to return to a state of inner equilibrium, and only then did he cast his gaze toward the myriad sword artwork with blue light flashing in his eyes. Moments later, he was completely immersed in the artwork before him. Han Li stayed in the secret chamber for over 10 days without leaving once, and the Myriad Treasure Convention finally officially commenced. On this day, Han Li was seated on his futon, and he suddenly seemed to have sensed something as he swept a sleeve through the air to stow away the myriad sword artwork before him. He then rose to his feet before emerging from the secret chamber to find that young Master Hai and Qi Lingzi were waiting respectfully for him in the hall. The 2 of them immediately extended salutes toward him as he emerged, following which young Master Hai pulled a shimmering golden slip out of his sleeve before handing it over to Han Li with both hands. Senior Han, this is an invitation slip sent to you by the Myriad Treasure Convention. As long as you hold this invitation slip, you can access all of the auctions and venues in the event. On top of that, due to the fact that this is the first day of the Myriad Treasure Convention, there's going to be a large auction held on the flying Immortal Peak. According to past conventions, this will be the Myriad Treasure Convention's most important auction, and it also heralds the commencement of the convention. All of the most important treasures of the convention will appear on the auction, Xianxia explained in a respectful manner. Oh, you two seem to have gathered a lot of information about this. Looks like all the walking around you did these past few days wasn't just a waste of time, Han Li said with a smile as he accepted the golden invitation slip before taking a glance at it. On the surface of the slip were the words Myriad Treasure, inscribed in ancient text, and on the other side was a shimmering silver diagram of a prized treasure. Have the 7 demon monarchs all arrived during my time in seclusion? Han Li asked as he stowed the golden slip away. All of them have arrived aside from Wolf Monarch Tian Kui and the Heavenly Fox Monarch, young Master Hai replied in a respectful manner. Those two haven't arrived. That's interesting. Generally speaking, the 7 demon monarchs regard this Myriad Treasure Convention as an extremely important event and wouldn't miss it for no good reason, Han Li mused as his brows furrowed slightly. I heard that Wolf Monarch Tian Kui is in seclusion, cultivating a powerful ability, so he won't be able to attend the convention. As for the Heavenly Fox Monarch, he doesn't seem to be on the territory of the Heavenly Fox race. He only sent someone to announce that he had some important matters to attend to, and that's all the news we have about him, Xianxia replied in a truthful manner. I see. In that case, let's set off as well. There will be many events held during the Myriad Treasure Convention, but I'll only actually be interested in a few of them, and I definitely can't miss the first auction. You two can come with me. Not everyone will be granted access to the auction, but with this golden slip, I should be able to bring along a couple disciples, Han Li suddenly said with a smile. Letter 1D557, letter 1D5FF, letter 1D556, letter 1D41, letter 1D430, letter 1D5F2, letter 1D680, letter 1D428, letter 1D696. The two of them faltered slightly upon hearing this before an excited look appeared on young Master Hai's face. Disciples, does that mean you're willing to take us as your disciples, Senior Han? Han Li shook his head and put on a serious expression as he replied, You two are too weak to become my disciples, but I can take you as my in-name disciples if you'd like. You can become official disciples of mine whenever you reach the deity transformation stage. I hope you won't disappoint me. We'd love to be your in-name disciples. We pay our respects to our master. Xianxia knelt down and kowtowed thrice in succession without any hesitation. Young Master Hai was also extremely excited and emulated Xianxia. Han Li could see that the two of them were being sincere, so he accepted these formalities before waving a sleeve through the air, unleashing a burst of force that helped the two of them to their feet. After that, he continued, Now that the two of you are my in-name disciples, you should know some things about me. Prior to meeting the two of you, I also accepted 2 disciples in a lower realm. Hence, you won't be my only 2 disciples. You have a senior martial brother and a senior martial sister above you. I'm a man of solitude, so I don't take disciples lightly, as doing so could hinder my own cultivation. Hence, there are reasons behind why I accepted you two and your senior martial brother and senior martial sister as my disciples. I have to explain these reasons to you in case a misunderstanding arises and you decide to plot against me. A cold tone crept into Han Li's voice at the end, and the temperature in the entire hall abruptly plummeted. Young Master Hai and Xianxia both shuddered in response to the sudden temperature drop and hurriedly proclaimed that they wouldn't dare to do anything to Han Li's detriment. Well, it's not a matter of whether you dare to plot against me or not. If I had been accepted as a disciple by a body integration cultivator, as a foundation establishment cultivator, I would also be quite suspicious toward the motives involved. Han Li chuckled in a nonchalant manner. Young Master Hai and Xianxia exchanged an awkward glance upon hearing this, and both of them remained silent. Truth be told, if you two really were an ordinary foundation establishment cultivator and an ordinary body refinement warrior, there's no way that I would take you as my in-name disciples, so you can say that fate is what brought us together. I'm very satisfied with your senses of justice and moral compass, but most importantly, one of you possesses a legendary recessive spiritual root, while the other possesses an inherited treasure, Han Li explained. Recessive spiritual root. Inherited treasure. Both young Master Hai and Qi Lingzi were quite puzzled to hear this. At their levels, there was no way that they could be knowledgeable about such things. Qi Lingzi, the inherited treasure you possess is quite easy to explain. It's most likely a treasure that contains the cultivation arts and secret techniques of the Mist Sea Taoist Temple. The treasure has been sealed within your body, and once you reach a certain cultivation base, the seal will be undone of its own accord, thereby bestowing upon you the appropriate cultivation arts for you to use. Of course, this is quite a rare type of treasure, and it'll definitely be quite a powerful one if you can use it along with its corresponding cultivation art, Han Li explained. I see. I knew that there was something weird inside my body, and I have these strange dreams from time to time. It must be because of this thing, Qi Lingzi murmured to himself in a stunned manner. And Li smiled upon hearing this before continuing. You're very fortunate. This Miss Sea Taoist temple may be an insignificant little sect, but according to my observations, its ability and secret techniques are quite powerful and are also very suitable for you to cultivate. Hence, I won't need to give you any further instructions on your main cultivation art. All I'll do is pass on some secret techniques to you once you become powerful enough to cultivate them. Thus, you'll still need to continue to keep the inheritance of the Mist Sea Taoist temple alive. When you become powerful enough, you can become the Mist Sea Taoist temple master again and take the temple to greater heights. I definitely won't stop you from pursuing this endeavor. Hence, I decided to accept you as my disciple as you already have your own inheritance and require minimal instruction in your cultivation. Otherwise, I wouldn't burden myself like this no matter how brilliant your aptitude was. Of course, now that you're my disciple, I certainly won't be stingy and withhold any resources that you may require to further your cultivation. However, if you don't wish to conform to me and think that you can do better on your own with the inheritance you've received, you can revoke your pledge to become my disciple, Han Li said in a calm manner. Qi Lingzi's expression changed drastically upon hearing this, and he fell to his knees again as he hurriedly said, I wouldn't dare, Master. Being able to become your in-name disciple is a vastly fortunate outcome for me. As for what kind of cultivation arts I should use, that will naturally be up to you, and I'll accept whatever arrangement without any complaints. Han Li nodded in a pleased manner before turning to young Master Hai. In that case, there are no issues between us. As for young Master Hai, please call me Hai Yueshan Master. Young Master Hai is just a nickname my friends gave me as a joke. I wouldn't dare to impose the title upon you, Master, young Master Hai hurriedly said. So Hai Yueshan is your name. In that case, I'll call you Yueshan from now on, Han Li said with a smile. Yes, Master. Hai Yueshan naturally accepted this arrangement in a respectful manner. Your situation is completely different from that of Qi Lingzi. During these past few days, I've conducted thorough examinations of your spiritual root and also made some inquiries to other body integration stage fellow Taoists. Through this, I can now confirm that not only do you possess the rare molten body, that strange lightning spiritual root in your body is most likely the legendary recessive spiritual root. Therefore, to put it more accurately, it should be referred to as the recessive lightning spiritual root. Recessive lightning spiritual root, Hai Yueshan was still as confused as ever. The molten body is quite rare, but with the massive population that the human race has, there are quite a few who possess this physique, and it's the reason behind why you're able to progress so quickly in body refinement arts. As for your recessive spiritual root, that's something much rarer and more complex. There haven't been many recorded cases of recessive spiritual roots in history, so I didn't think of this right away, and it took me a long time before I could ascertain that it actually applied to you. Furthermore, recessive spiritual roots are extremely difficult to discover, and the probability of someone possessing such a spiritual root is definitely no higher than those who have inherited true spirit bloodlines, Han Li explained. Why is that? Qi Lingzi couldn't help but ask. That's because recessive spiritual roots can only be found in someone with a special physique or has inherited a special bloodline. Only those people have a certain chance of having their spiritual roots weakened or concealed by their special physiques or bloodlines. However, recessive spiritual roots are generally not very useful, and most cultivation sects wouldn't accept someone with such a trait unless the constitution or bloodline they possessed was extremely powerful, or if they possessed one of very few types of spiritual roots, such as one of the lightning or darkness attributes. Even so, the times when the spiritual root appears and disappears will have to be taken into account to determine whether the host of such a spiritual root will be worth nurturing. If the recessive spiritual root disappears for too long at a time, It'll be extremely difficult for them to cultivate, as the host would only be able to cultivate their magic power when the recessive spiritual root appears, Han Li explained. Hai Yueshen's eyes were practically glowing as he listened intently to Han Li's every word. He finally understood why he had been misdiagnosed at birth to possess no spiritual root, and he asked, "Master, your explanation is very clear about why a recessive spiritual root would make it difficult for one to cultivate. But why is it that there are only a few attributes of recessive spiritual roots that are held in high regard?" I see you've pinpointed the most important part of this right away. The darkness attribute spiritual root doesn't apply to you. This type of spiritual root is even rarer than your recessive lightning spiritual root, and there's only been one recorded case of it. As for your recessive lightning spiritual root, it'll make it several times more difficult for you to cultivate your magic power than it is for normal cultivators. But once you attain the Tao of Lightning, you'll be one of the very few types of people in this world who can assist others in transcending their lightning tribulations, Han Li replied. He'll be able to help others transcend their lightning tribulations, Qi Lingzi exclaimed before even Hai Yueshen could say anything. As a cultivator himself, he was naturally more aware of the impact of Han Li's words than Hai Yueshen was as a body refinement warrior. Indeed, hence, even though those with recessive lightning spiritual roots are very difficult to nurture, most sects would still do their best to nurture such a prospect as long as there's even the slightest sliver of an opportunity that they could become a high-grade cultivator in the future. However, if there's simply no potential at all for the host to get to such a level, then even someone with the rarer recessive darkness spiritual root would be discarded as a lost cause. I decided to accept you as my disciple, as your physique and spiritual root are very suitable for inheriting my path of simultaneous cultivation. Even during the period of time where your spiritual root goes into its recessive state, you can cultivate some body refinement techniques, so you won't be wasting your time. On top of that, I also have some lightning cultivation arts that you can use. If you manage to become a high-grade cultivator in the future, you'll be able to assist me while I transcend my future tribulations, and you could even be the difference between success and failure for me. Han Li revealed his own selfish motives without any attempt at deception. If I truly can become a high-grade cultivator someday, I'll definitely do everything in my power to assist you in your tribulation transcendence, Master, Hai Yueshen immediately said with a respectful bow. There's no need for you to be overly concerned about that for now. I'm not exactly pinning all of my hopes on this. Many years would have already passed before you become ready to assist me in my tribulation transcendence, so I wouldn't be overly reliant on something so unpredictable. The main reason I've decided to take you two as my disciples is because I'm quite fond of your personalities and values. However, don't think that I'll forget about how you two called me Brother Han for the entire journey to this place, Han Li chuckled. Hai Yueshen and Qi Lingzi could only offer awkward smiles in response. All right, it's about time we left. I'm quite interested in meeting some of the body integration stage fellow Taoists that I've yet to encounter, and we've also heard that there could be foreign beings coming to attend this convention, so that'll be quite interesting as well. I wonder which foreign race would go to the trouble of sending someone here from afar, Han Li said in a serious manner as his smile faded. Yes, Master, Hai Yueshen and Qi Lingzi hurriedly answered, and Han Li nodded before leading the two of them out of the hall. After exiting the immortal welcome palace, they could see spiritual light flashing in the distant sky. Groups of armored warriors were patrolling the air at low altitudes, and there were also humanoid figures further away in the distance. However, as soon as they reached within 5 kilometers of the immortal welcome palace, they would be held back by the nearby guards. It was clear that 9 Immortal Mountain was now accessible to the public. Han Li swept a sleeve through the air to send forth a burst of azure light, which swept up his 2 unnamed disciples before he rose up into the air. There was a flight restriction order on 9 Immortal Mountain, but it naturally didn't apply to body integration cultivators like Han Li. After determining that Han Li had flown out of the Immortal Welcome Palace, all of the patrolling guards merely turned a blind eye to his blatant violation of the flight restriction order. Thus, Han Li's trio flew toward the flying Immortal Peak as a streak of azure light. From their vantage point up above, they could clearly see that there were hordes of human and demonic beings down below. It wasn't exactly packed to the rafters, but there was nowhere one could look without seeing a human or demon. In particular, the buildings that were venues for the convention had been surrounded by beings from both races, and the population density only increased closer to the flying Immortal Peak. Yueshan and Qi Lingzi looked on with excitement in their eyes, but Han Li had attended many of these types of conventions, so the novelty had long since worn out for him. After briefly inspecting the situation down below, he moved on in an indifferent manner and reached the flying immortal peak after about 7 or 8 more minutes of flight. Not only were there far more patrolling guards in this area, some lightning guards on giant wolf steeds had also begun to appear in the air. When Han Li was a few kilometers away from the flying immortal peak, he was finally intercepted by several lightning guards. "Please forgive us for the intrusion, Senior, but we are bound by duty to check your invitation slip." The guards were led by a tall and broad elderly man, and he remained on his wolf steed, but cupped his fist in a respectful salute. Han Li glanced at the lightning guards before sweeping a sleeve through the air to send a streak of golden light flying toward them. The elderly man raised a hand to catch the golden light, and it was none other than Han Li's golden invitation slip. He was clearly only a body refinement warrior, but he was somehow able to glean the information hidden within the invitation slip with just a cursory touch. "Apologies for my rudeness, Senior Han. Are you here to participate in the auction? If so, I would be honored to guide you to the Myriad Treasure Hall." "Sure, lead the way then," Han Li replied with a nod. The elderly man immediately waved a hand toward his companions, instructing them to continue patrolling the area while he flew toward the flying immortal peak on his flying wolf steed. The flying immortal peak had a virtually vertical terrain that was extremely precarious, and there was no path leading up to the pinnacle from the foot of the mountain. If a mortal were to attempt to climb it, they would struggle to make any progress at all, let alone build any constructions on the peak. However, this was a simple task for cultivators. A vast sea of clouds had been conjured up both halfway up the mountain, as well as the pinnacle of the peak, and they were connected by 5 colored bridges, each of which was over 1,000 feet in length, and the Myriad Treasure Hall was situated within the sea of clouds at the pinnacle of the mountain. From afar, Han Li could see a series of pavilions and buildings within the white clouds, as well as hints of greenery. The sounds of flowing water and cheerful chirping could also be heard, and it resembled an immortal paradise. He had already heard about how beautiful this flying immortal peak was, but it was still quite an awe-inspiring experience to be seeing it for himself. Yueshan and Qi Lingzi were completely entranced by this glorious sight. Aside from Han Li's trio, there were other cultivators who were also converging from all directions, but those people weren't able to fly directly toward the peak without any inhibitions. Most of them arrived at the foot of the mountain before being transported up the mountain by flying carriages, then making their way into the sea of clouds along the 5 colored bridges. Body integration cultivators like Han Li were few and far in between, and they would only make fleeting appearances before vanishing into the sea of clouds in a flash. Han Li was guided into the air above a certain palace before descending near a certain secluded entrance. Letter 1D4BB, letter 1D45F, letter 1D626, letter 1D626, letter 1D638, letter 212F, letter 1D624, letter 1D630, letter 1D628. There were a dozen or so guards and several servants waiting at the entrance, and there was a middle-aged man in a set of brocade robes standing before them, conversing with a woman in a black dress with a fawning smile on his face. Han Li could only see the tall and slender profile of the woman in black from behind, and she was giving off an indescribable air of authority, indicating that she seemed to be quite an important figure. Behind her stood another woman in purple who appeared to be around 17 to 18 years of age. She had an oval face and gave off a graceful and refined disposition. She wasn't extremely beautiful, but there was a rare, refreshing air about her that was very alluring nonetheless. The nearby guards and servants were clearly aware that these two were very important figures, but they still couldn't help but steal furtive glances at the woman in purple. The woman in purple paid no heed to the scrutiny and listened to the conversation between the woman in black and the middle-aged man with a sweet smile on her face. Han Li's gaze lingered momentarily on the woman in purple before moving on to the middle-aged man and the woman in black, upon which a hint of surprise flashed through his eyes. In the next instant, he descended with Yueshan and Qi Lingzi near the entrance amid a flash of azure light. In doing so, they naturally attracted the attention of everyone at the entrance, and they all cast their eyes toward Han Li's trio. Only then did Han Li get a clear glimpse of the woman in black, and she discovered that she was quite a regal beauty with slender brows and well-shaped eyes, as well as a thin nose and petite lips. However, she faltered momentarily at the sight of Han Li, before turning to the woman in purple with a peculiar look on her face. Meanwhile, a hint of elation flashed through the eyes of the woman in purple, but she immediately hid her emotions thereafter. The brocade-robed man swept his spiritual sense toward Han Li, upon which a perplexed look appeared on his face. However, a thought then immediately occurred to him, and he smiled as he said, "I don't think I've seen you before, fellow Taoist. Could you be the new body integration cultivator, fellow Taoist Han Li?" This man was also an early body integration cultivator, so Han Li immediately cupped his fist in a salute. "I am indeed Han Li. May I ask for your name, fellow Taoist?" I'm the Deputy City Lord of Xuanwu City, Pengju. I'm also the human supervisor for this convention. It truly is very much worthy of celebration that our human race is able to welcome another body integration cultivator, Pengju said in a polite manner. "You're far too kind, fellow Taoist. I've only just reached the body integration stage, so I'm still sorely lacking in both magic power and strength. I'll have to rely on you for guidance, City Lord Peng," Han Li replied in a modest manner. "All of us body integration cultivators from the human and demon races have heard about how you progressed from the deity transformation stage to the body integration stage in just a few centuries. With your aptitude, it's highly likely that you'll leave all of us old geezers behind," Peng Ju chuckled. "Haha, thank you for your kind words, fellow Taoist Peng. May I ask who this is?" Han Li asked as he turned toward the woman in the black dress. This woman's magic power was abundant to the extreme, and she was a late body integration cultivator, which came as a slight shock to Han Li, and he couldn't help but guess at her true identity. As for the woman in purple, he reflexively ignored her. "My name is Xiao Guan. Have you heard of me, fellow Taoist Han?" The woman in black appraised Han Li with an intrigued smile. "You're the Black Phoenix Monarch." He had already guessed this to be the case, but his heart still jolted slightly upon receiving confirmation of this. "Looks like you have heard of me, fellow Taoist Han. Come to think of it, you seem to have had some run-ins with a junior of mine by the name of Xiao Hong," the woman chuckled. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly, and he wanted to say something to explain himself, but Xiao Guan merely waved a nonchalant hand. "Please don't misunderstand, fellow Taoist Han. It was Xiao Hong who went too far back then. To think that she would dare to collude with others to try and secure the Yi family's heavenly phoenix true blood. I've already handed down a punishment to her and ordered her to stay in seclusion for 1,000 years to repent. I only brought this up as I wanted to thank you for not allowing her to sour our relationship with the Yi family. You most likely aren't aware of this, but the Yi family's grand elder has been a good friend of mine for many years, and I definitely don't want to see our relationship deteriorate because of something like this." Han Li was rather taken aback to hear this, and he didn't know if Xiao Guan was telling the truth, but he naturally went along with it and replied with a smile, "In that case, I won't need to explain myself then." Peng Ju was naturally unaware of the run-ins that Han Li had had with the Black Phoenix race, but he was still quite pleased to see him and the Black Phoenix monarch settle their differences so easily, nonetheless. Thus, he cupped his fist as a salute to the two of them and said, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, fellow Taoist Han, the auction is about to begin. Please go in first. I still have to wait here for other fellow Taoists to arrive." "It is indeed time for me to go in. Let's go there." Xiao Guan nodded in response before waving a hand toward the woman in purple, then made her way into the palace in an elegant and graceful manner. "There?" Han Li faltered slightly upon hearing this before turning to the woman in purple with a peculiar look. However, she had since lowered her head and departed with Xiao Guan without taking a single glance at Han Li. Throughout this process, she hadn't spoken a single word to him. Han Li was rather suspicious about this, and a contemplative look appeared on his face as the woman in purple departed. Could it be that this dare was the little girl that Xiao Hong had taken away from him so long ago? 1. That dare had been born to human and demon parents, and she seemed to have been held in high regard by the Black Phoenix race. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sent a deity transformation stage demonic cultivator in the form of Xiao Hong to infiltrate deep into human territory to take her away. If this woman in purple really was Dare, then it wouldn't be strange at all for her to appear beside the Black Phoenix monarch. However, it was rather implausible to think that she could become an early deity transformation cultivator from a mere mortal in just a few hundred years. Even if the Black Phoenix race held Dare in very high regard, and she possessed an extremely powerful Black Phoenix bloodline, this rate of progress was still far too astonishing. It was no less impressive a transformation than his progression from the deity transformation stage to the body integration stage in a few centuries. He could still clearly recall Dare's physical appearance, and while it was indeed true that a lot of time had passed since they had been together, he was unable to see many similarities between the woman in purple and Dare as a little girl. Furthermore, if this really was Dare, then why didn't she greet him? His appearance hadn't changed at all during the past few centuries. The little girl had been very fond of and reliant on him in the past. And Li became even more confused as these thoughts ran through his mind. Peng Ju was also a little perplexed to see Han Li standing on the spot, seemingly in deep thought. But he didn't urge Han Li to hurry along, and merely appraised him in silence with a polite smile on his face. Brother Peng, is that fellow Taoist Dare also a member of the Black Phoenix race? Do you know what relationship she shares with fellow Taoist Zio? Han Li finally asked. I had thought that you hadn't noticed her, Brother Han. According to what I've heard, this Dare is a direct lineal descendant of fellow Taoist Zio, and she's vastly renowned among the younger generation of the demon race. I've heard that not only does she possess astonishing cultivation aptitude, she also possesses beauty in equal measure and is known as Fairy Phoenix Spirit. Countless demonic young men have become infatuated after seeing her true appearance and have sought out a relationship with her, all to no avail, Peng Ju replied with a smile. True appearance. Han Li's expression changed slightly upon hearing this. It's no wonder that you haven't heard about this, fellow Taoist Han. Her current appearance has been concealed by fellow Taoist Zio using one of her bonded true feathers. Unless one were to remove the feather, no one would be able to glean her true appearance no matter what powerful abilities they possess. According to fellow Taoist Zio, this was a precautionary measure taken to avoid potential trouble during the Myriad Treasure Convention. Are you interested in her as well, fellow Taoist Han? Come to think of it, you may be a body integration cultivator, but you're certainly a lot younger than other fellow Taoists of the same cultivation base. If you were to pursue her, I think you would have a decent chance. Apparently, she's not a pureblood member of the Black Phoenix race, but half human, half demon instead, Peng Ju said with a suggestive smile. Of course, he was only making a joke, and didn't seriously think that Han Li was interested in pursuing a romantic relationship with this Dare. Surely you jest, Brother Peng. I was only asking as I had sensed that woman possesses a rather unique disposition. It's about time I went in as well, Han Li replied with a smile. Peng Ju didn't think too much of this and cupped his fist in another salute. I still have to wait for other fellow Taoists, so I won't accompany you any further. At this moment, another female servant strode over to Han Li before leading his trio into the palace. In the instant that Han Li turned away from Peng Ju, a contemplative look resurfaced in his eyes. After the group passed through a long corridor paved with white jade, they arrived in a massive hall that was split up into several levels. This was a circular hall that was tens of thousands of feet in size, with a white jade platform that was over 100 feet tall at the center. There was no one on the platform, but balls of spiritual light were shimmering incessantly at its four corners. Situated at each of those four corners was a silver flying sword that was around 3 feet in length. Beneath the platform were 8 golden-armored halberd-wielding guards. Their faces had all been concealed behind silver visors, and black baleful chi was swirling around their bodies, presenting a rather mysterious sight to behold. Han Li glanced at the 4 flying swords and 8 golden-armored warriors as blue light flashed through his eyes, and his expression changed slightly. Not only were all of the flying swords spirit treasures, they also had a certain type of connection between one another, so it was quite clear that they comprised a set of treasures. Each flying sword was already a spirit treasure on its own, so the combination of the 4 would naturally be extremely powerful. As for the 8 armored guards, Han Li couldn't sense any magic power fluctuations from them, but the black baleful chi swirling around their bodies was an indication of how fearsome they were. With that in mind, Han Li's trio was led by the servant to the highest level of the hall, which was the 3rd level, and they were guided into an extremely intricately decorated room. The room was only around 70 to 80 feet in size, but it was complete with tables and chairs, as well pots of spirit flowers growing in each of the 4 corners. There was a square window on the wall facing the tall platform, and there was faint white mist in front of the window, preventing others from being able to see into the room, but it didn't obstruct the vision of those in the room in the slightest. Senior, are you pleased with this VIP room? If not, I can take you to another one, the servant asked in a respectful manner. No need, I'm happy with this one, Han Li replied in an indifferent manner. In that case, I'll be taking my leave. Feel free to call for me if you need me. I'll be standing outside the door, the servant said as she lowered her head. Han Li nodded in response before waving a dismissive hand, and the servant immediately left the room and closed the door gently behind her. Meanwhile, Hai Yueshan and Qi Lingzi were constantly inspecting the room in a curious manner, and their eyes finally fell upon the window. Han Li strode over to one of the chairs in front of the window before taking a seat. In front of the chair was a green wooden table, upon which sat a formation plate that he could use to place bids. Han Li merely took an errant glance at everything, before casting his gaze out the window again in an expressionless manner. At this point, tens of thousands of humans and demons were already visible through the window, and they had taken up all of the seats on the first and second levels. Most of them were at the deity transformation stage and spatial tempering stage. As for body integration stage beings like Han Li, all of them were naturally guided to individual cabins on the third floor. Han Li looked around, and after discovering that there was nothing worth seeing for the moment, he closed his eyes to rest. Hai Yueshan and Qi Lingzi naturally stood behind him on either side in a respectful manner. After a long while, the chatter and commotion coming from down below suddenly cut off, and the entire massive hall instantly fell silent. Han Li reopened his eyes and cast his gaze toward the tall platform through the window. There were currently two people standing side by side on the platform, both of which had extremely peculiar appearances. One of them was over 20 feet tall with black chi swirling around his body. He seemed to be a burly man, but it was impossible to glean his true appearance. Meanwhile, his companion was even taller than him and had a crimson horn on his head, as well as a pair or remarkably large green eyes and translucent scales on either side of his face. This was quite clearly a metamorphosed demon. Han Li's pupils contracted slightly at the sight of them, but his expression remained unchanged. At this moment, the man enshrouded in black chi suddenly said, "I'm sure most of you recognize me as the Tyrant Sovereign and also know a fellow Taoist Li Hu beside me, so I won't make any detailed introductions. I hereby announce the commencement of the first auction of the Myriad Treasure Convention." 1 Chapter 1291, the chapter where Han Li parts with Dare. This burly man with black chi swirling around him was none other than Xu and Wu Tyrant Sovereign, and the demon referred to as Li Hu by him was naturally none other than Worm Monarch Li Hu. It came as quite a surprise to everyone that these two had appeared to announce the commencement of the auction. After the sovereign and monarch walked off the platform, a white-robed elderly man took their place, and he was followed closely by two groups of children, each of whom was holding a platter in their hands. The platters were all concealed completely under pieces of golden fabric, preventing anyone from being able to glean their contents. "I'm Heavenly Eye Disciple, and I'll be hosting this auction. Please look after me, fellow Taoists." The elderly man chuckled as he cupped his fist in a salute. "Haha, all of us are very relieved to see that you'll be hosting the auction, fellow Taoist Heavenly Eye. Indeed, setting aside everything else, your ocular powers alone are vastly renowned among our two races." The mid-spatial tempering stage elderly man was clearly quite a popular and renowned figure. Heavenly Eye Disciple's smile widened, and he extended another salute before cutting straight to the chase. "All of you have come from afar, so I'm sure you don't have any patience to listen to an old man like me. Hence, let the auction begin. Present the first auction item." Heavenly Eye Disciple brandished a hand behind him as he spoke, and one of the children immediately stepped forward carefully before raising his platter above his head, offering it to the elderly man in a respectful manner. Heavenly Eye Disciple swept an arm through the air to remove the golden cloth on the platter, revealing a shimmering silver crystal. The crystal was only around the size of a human fist, but its surface was covered in a layer of naturally formed patterns. These patterns were shimmering with silver light, as if countless silver threads had fused into the crystal, presenting a very beautiful sight to behold. This is a silver thread crystal, which is an exceptional metal attribute tool refinement material. This crystal can only be found in the Whiteface Canyon, which is situated in the easternmost region of the human territory, and the average yearly production of this material is less than half of this crystal presented here, so that's an indication of just how precious this material is. If a normal flying sword were to be infused with even a tiny amount of this material, its sharpness would immediately be increased dramatically. If this material were to be used to refine a treasure, there would be a very good chance of that treasure turning out as a spirit treasure. Hence, the starting price of this crystal is 3 million spirit stones, and each bid must have a minimum increment of 100,000 spirit stones. You may now begin bidding. Heavenly Eye Disciple announced after a brief introduction. This silver thread crystal wasn't all that alluring to body integration cultivators, but it was clearly very much sought after by deity transformation and spatial tempering cultivators. After all, that Whiteface Canyon was under the direct control of Xuanwu City, and the measly yearly production of silver thread crystal normally wasn't even enough to satisfy the needs of Xuanwu City alone. As such, many people were naturally extremely interested in this large chunk being put up for auction. 4 million. 4,500,000. 5 million. The bids came in thick and fast, and in the end, the crystal was purchased for the lofty price of 7,300,000 spirit stones by an unidentifiable demonic being with long black fur all over their body, much to the dismay of many human cultivators present. Everyone knew that the demon race wasn't that adept in tool refinement, so it came as quite a surprise to everyone that a demon would be willing to pay such a high price for this silver thread crystal. Seeing as the first auction item was a tool refinement material, the string of subsequent auction items were naturally from the same category. However, after nearly a dozen or so items had been sold, most of the people in the hall were starting to grow quite alarmed. 8 of these tool refinement materials had all been purchased by that black-furred demonic being for incredibly high prices. It was as if he had unlimited wealth and was determined to secure these materials. Aside from the demonic being's arms, his entire body had been concealed by a yellow hooded leather cloak, making it impossible to glean his true appearance. Of course, that only applied to deity transformation and spatial tempering cultivators. A body integration cultivator like Han Li would still be able to bypass the concealment properties of the leather cloak by force using his spiritual sense. That's a black wolf demon. He's only at the early spatial tempering stage. How does he possess so much wealth? Could it be that he's quite an important figure among the wolf race? Han Li murmured to himself with furrowed brows as blue light flashed through his eyes. Qi Lingzi and Hai Yueshan were able to hear what he was saying, but they still had no idea what was going on, so they naturally didn't dare to interject. At this moment, a piece of fabric that was glowing with fiery crimson light was revealed on the platter being held by another child, and a stir immediately ran through the entire hall. That's a piece of fabric woven with crystalline flame threads. Letter 1D65B, letter 1D4FB, letter 1D486, letter 1D486, letter 1D498, letter 1D65A, letter 1D658, letter 1D664, letter 1D662. That's incredible. Greedy expressions appeared on many people's faces at the sight of this piece of fabric, as if they wanted nothing better than to rush onto the platform and grab it for themselves. Master, what's this crystalline flame thread? It seems like many people are interested in it. Hai Yueshan couldn't help but ask. Crystalline flame threads are a type of spirit material that can only be found in the territory of the Black Phoenix race. I've heard that these threads are produced by a type of fire insect that dwells within lava. However, these fire insects can only produce a single thread in their lifetime, and they can only be found in a certain lava realm owned by the Black Phoenix race, so they're even rarer than silver thread crystals. If such a material were to be used to refine a fire attribute treasure, a cultivator using fire attribute cultivation arts would enjoy a slight boost in their rate of cultivation just by carrying the treasure around at all times. On top of that, the treasure would also possess powerful fire attribute abilities, so this material is naturally extremely sought after among those using fire attribute cultivation arts, Han Li explained with a smile. I see, that certainly explains their reactions, Qi Lingzi chuckled. At this point, Heavenly Eye Disciple had already announced the starting price for this piece of fabric, and the bids came flying in even faster than they did for the previous few auction items. The starting price was doubled in virtually the blink of an eye, and had reached an astronomical sum. As a result, the frenetic bidding finally died down a little, and there were only 5 or 6 people still trading blows, one of which was none other than the black-furred demonic being. To no one's surprise, the Black Wolf demon once again came out on top, securing the piece of fabric for a staggering sum. As a result, he attracted even more attention, and many beings from both the human and demon races were casting frequent glances toward him, and the looks in their eyes certainly didn't reflect any friendly intentions. However, everyone's attention was then drawn to Heavenly Eye Disciple after hearing what he had to say next. Many of you have attended the Myriad Treasure Convention in the past, so I'm sure you know that the sequence of this auction is different from that of most other auctions. We won't be saving all of the best auction items for the end. Instead, we'll be dispersing them through various points in the auction, and one of them is about to be brought out right now. I'm sure it won't disappoint. He suddenly clapped his hands twice as he spoke, and a stunning young female servant strode onto the platform with a green wooden box that was around half a foot in size in her hands. She made her way over to heavenly-eyed disciple with a captivating smile on her face, and a serious look appeared in the elderly man's eyes for the first time as he carefully accepted the wooden box from the servant before turning to face everyone again. I'm sure that some of you would have heard of weeping spirit bloodwood, but how many of you have seen it? There is a small section of this spirit material in this box, and it has a vast array of uses. It can act as a material to assist one in unleashing several types of powerful abilities, and it can also be refined into a second clone or a puppet that can take one's place during tribulation transcendence. It's also the main material required to refine the vastly renowned Weeping Blood Spirit bead. Heavenly Eye Disciple announced in a solemn manner. Most people were quite befuddled to hear this, and only a minority of auction-goers displayed ecstatic reactions upon hearing this. Weeping Blood Spirit Wood. Isn't this viewed as a sacred artifact among the spirit race? How could something like this appear on an auction for humans and demons? The cultivators who were aware of what this item was were astonished, and Han Li's expression also changed slightly. At the same time, he could sense many bursts of spiritual sense fluctuations emanating from the cabins on the third floor, clearly indicating that many of the body integration stage beings were also very interested in this item. I'm naturally not sure of where this material was secured from, but I can assure all of you of its authenticity. He removed the lid of the box as he spoke, and the pungent odor of blood and gore immediately erupted forth, forming a cloud of dense blood mist that twisted and writhed in midair like a crimson python. Heavenly Eye Disciple took a deep breath as golden light flashed through his eyes, and spread his fingers before abruptly reaching into the box with one hand. In the next instant, a reddish-black section of wood appeared before everyone. The piece of wood was around half a foot in length and as thick as a human thumb. It was completely dull and devoid of luster, but wisps of crimson mist were being emitted by it relentlessly. The crimson mist surged and intertwined incessantly, before rising straight up into the air as if it were a living being. Han Li's eyes narrowed slightly upon seeing this. He had heard of this weeping spirit blood wood in the past, and they were actually the remains of certain types of mutated wood attribute beings of the spirit race, and they were indeed extremely rare, even in the spirit race itself. Second clones and weeping blood spirit beads were all vastly renowned, but what truly tempted him was naturally the tribulation transcendence substitution puppet. Even though he could refine spirit form talismans that could also serve the same purpose, as he became more and more powerful, the talismans became less and less efficacious for him. Even if he were to nurture it for a very long time, it wouldn't be able to assist him much in his tribulation transcendence. The tribulation transcendence substitution puppet was a treasure that had been vastly renowned in the human race for a long time, and it was effective even for body integration stage beings. However, these puppets were disposable items that could only be used once, and one had to use it at the correct time. Otherwise, activating it too early or too late would both result in the puppet being wasted for nothing. Han Li was slightly tempted as he appraised the weeping spirit blood wood being held by Heavenly Eye Disciple. After witnessing the large auctions held by foreign races, there weren't many things in the human and demon races that could tempt him, so he didn't think that the first auction item of true value to be brought out would pique his interest. If he could obtain a tribulation transcendence substitution puppet, it could save him from a life-threatening situation in the future. However, this material could only be found in the spirit race, so could it really be true that there were foreign beings participating in this myriad treasure convention? As these thoughts were flashing through Han Li's mind, Heavenly Eye Disciple activated his magic power before injecting a part of it into the piece of wood in his hand. Piercing crimson light erupted from the slim piece of wood, and it began to expand drastically to around as thick as a human arm, and also elongated to roughly 10 feet in length. Reddish-black spots that were around the size of copper coins peered over the surface of the wooden rod, and it writhed incessantly in his hand while emitting bursts of eerie weeping sounds as if it were a living spirit python, presenting a very unsettling scene to behold. Those who had still harbored some suspicions toward the authenticity of the item immediately had their doubts erased, and when the starting price of 20 million spirit stones was announced, a flurry of bids was quickly made. 22 million, 25 million, 30 million. This astronomical price immediately scared off half of the bidders. No matter how precious this weeping spirit bloodwood was, deity transformation and spatial tempering cultivators had limited finances, and it would not be wise to exhaust all of their wealth to purchase such an item. In comparison, it was much more pragmatic to purchase a few powerful protective treasures or some pills that could assist them in breaking through their next bottleneck. However, some of the high-grade human and demonic beings, who were aware of the imminent devilish tribulation, had different opinions. Many of them were eager to get their hands on this spirit item, and the price continued to swell at a rapid rate, with the bids only slowing down slightly after passing 40 million. Even so, the price was still slowly bid up to a staggering 50 million. This was a massive price to pay even for some body integration stage beings, and the one who had placed this bid wasn't any of the body integration stage beings on the third floor. Instead, it was still the same black wolf demon, and as a result, he began to attract even more incredulous eyes. More bursts of spiritual sense also began to sweep toward him from the third floor, and it was quite clear that even the body integration stage beings were quite bewildered by his astonishing wealth. In the face of these powerful bursts of spiritual sense, the black wolf demon remained completely still in his chair, seemingly completely unfazed. "Oh, I was wondering who this is. It's one of Brother Tian Q's 6 clones. I had failed to detect this in the beginning," a woman from the third floor chuckled, and her voice echoed throughout the entire hall, creating quite a stir in the entire venue. Many people's expressions changed drastically upon hearing the mention of Wolf Monarch Tian Qi, and even the body integration cultivators on the third floor were quite alarmed to hear this, including Han Li. "Are you sure, fellow Taoist Zio? Isn't the Wolf Monarch cultivating in seclusion? How would he have the spare capacity to send one of his clones here? According to my knowledge, all 6 of his clones possess incredible abilities that can assist his true body in his cultivation. How could he send one of them to this place?" A skeptical male voice rang out from another cabin. Han Li's expression changed ever so slightly, as he could hear that the owner of the voice was none other than Heavenly Yuan Holy Sovereign. "I don't think I need to inform you too that I'm sending my clone to the convention in my stead. If you too also want this weeping spirit bloodwood, then feel free to place your bids. I won't do anything to stop you." The voice of this clone was extremely cold and completely devoid of emotion, but also very distinct and memorable at the same time. As opposed to being enraged, Heavenly Yuan Holy Sovereign merely replied in a nonchalant manner, "He, that's true. I have no business meddling in fellow Taoist Tian Qi's business. Forgive me for my transgression. Seeing as you want this piece of weeping spirit bloodwood, then I won't participate in the bidding." As for the Black Phoenix Monarch, she merely chuckled before also falling silent, seeming rather wary of Wolf Monarch Tian Qi. As for all of the beings on the first and second levels, they had all adopted expressions of awe and veneration, and the entire hall fell completely silent. "If no one else is going to make a bid, then shouldn't it be announced that I'm now the owner of this item?" Wolf Monarch Tian Qi said in a completely emotionless voice as he cast his gaze onto the platform. His voice wasn't very loud, but it was clearly audible to everyone, and Heavenly Eye Disciple's heart jolted in response. He had originally intended to stall for time, but he completely cast aside that plan and forced a smile onto his face as he said, "The price for this item has now reached 50 million spirit stones. I'll now be making 3 calls, and if no further bids are made by then the item will go to Senior Tian Qi. 50 million going once. 60 million. An elderly voice suddenly rang out from the third floor, sending quite a stir turning through the entire hall again. 62 million. Wolf Monarch Tian Qi said in an emotionless manner. 65 million. The elderly voice placed another bid without any hesitation. A cold light flashed through the eyes of the Wolf Monarch Tian Qi clone, and he said in a cold voice, "Do you insist on competing with me for this item, Dong Tian? It seems you've well and truly recovered from being struck by my heavenly wolf claws during our last clash. HMPH, your heavenly wolf claws only served to scratch an itch of mine. In contrast, I'm sure my Dong Tian drill gave you a very hard time," the owner of the elderly voice harumphed coldly in response. This was none other than the most enigmatic of the 7 demon monarchs, Mouse Monarch Dong Tian. It seemed that the two of them weren't on very good terms and had even clashed in the past. All of the other cultivators present were naturally quite surprised and intrigued to learn about this. Meanwhile, green light flashed violently from the wolf monarch Tian Kui clone, and he said, "This item is indeed worth 65 million, so I'll hand it over to you, fellow Taoist Dong Tian. I wonder if you'll still have enough spirit stones left to compete with others during the course of this auction, though." The clone then closed its eyes, and it really did bow out of the bidding. Mouse monarch Dong Tian was quite taken aback by this, but he merely harumphed coldly and fell silent. As for all of the other body integration cultivators, they were either unwilling to contend with the two demon monarchs or looking forward to the other prominent auction items, so none of them placed any bids either. Thus, Heavenly Eye Disciple didn't hesitate any longer and quickly made 2 calls at 65 million. However, right at this moment, Han Li suddenly pointed a finger at the formation plate before him, entering a bid of 70 million. 65,000. 70 million going once. Heavenly Eye Disciple had thought that the final bid had already been placed, only to be caught completely off guard by this new bid, and he hurriedly corrected himself before he could make a third call at 65 million. All of the beings in the hall were quite stunned to see this. Who was competing with Mouse Monarch Dong Tian for this section of Weeping Spirit Blood Wood? Did they have a death wish, or were they truly powerful enough to contend with the demon monarchs? Unfortunately, the bidder hadn't spoken, so no one could tell who he was. However, the so-called confidentiality guarantee of the auction wasn't actually all that strictly enforced, so if one wanted to dig up the bidder's identity, it wouldn't be an overly difficult task. Much to everyone's surprise, Mouse Monarch Dong Tian remained completely silent and allowed Han Li to take the Weeping Spirit Blood Wood. Perhaps 70 million spirit stones really was too high a price for this item, and no one placed any further bids. Thus, the item fell into Han Li's hands after 3 calls. Han Li wasn't all that surprised to see this. Judging from what had just been said by the wolf monarch Tian Kui clone, the 3 sovereigns, 7 monarchs, and even some other body integration stage beings present seemed to have received some information and were aiming for certain treasures during this auction. As such, the Weeping Spirit Blood Wood wasn't a priority for them, and they were just as happy to keep their spirit stones for later. Just as these thoughts were flashing through Han Li's mind, a small group of guards delivered the Weeping Spirit Blood Wood to his cabin, and they departed after Han Li issued the spirit stones required. After carefully examining the item, he carefully stowed it away, then stroked his severely depleted storage bracelet with a wry smile on his face. He had managed to secure this item, but it had cost him most of his spirit stones, so he most likely wouldn't be able to compete for any of the upcoming next auction items. Letter 1D453, letter 1D4C7, letter 1D626, letter 212F, letter 1D638, letter 1D626, letter 1D450, letter 1D45C, letter 1D4C2. However, he didn't regret this decision. He already had countless treasures and precious materials, but it was very unlikely that he would encounter something like this piece of Weeping Spirit Blood Wood again. Even if there were some other auction items yet to appear that would be useful to body integration stage beings, he wouldn't be able to compete with the wealth of the 3 sovereigns and 7 monarchs anyway. Thus, he was more interested in those demon beast materials, and he was also very much looking forward to the upcoming Black Realm Exchange Convention. Hence, Han Li merely laid back in his chair and closed his eyes, as one auction item was introduced after another by Heavenly Eye Disciple. Seeing as this was an auction that was held once every 1,000 years, the rest of the prominent auction items were naturally all exceedingly rare and precious, all of which were far beyond the reach of normal cultivators, but none of them were items that Han Li required. After the first batch of prominent auction items were sold, Heavenly Eye Disciple immediately summoned another group of female servants to the platform and began to auction off spirit medicines and ingredients, as well as all types of pills that would be very hard to find in normal auctions. These items were naturally even less appealing to Han Li, but his attention was drawn to the spirit flowers and spirit herbs that appeared at the end, all of which could only be nurtured by the spirit race. However, after hearing that these spirit medicines required the origin spiritual power of spirit beings to nourish, he decided against trying to bid for them. These spirit medicines did indeed possess extraordinary effects, but they most likely couldn't be nurtured to full maturity by the green liquid in his mysterious vial alone, so he wouldn't be able to mass-produce them, which made them rather unattractive to him. After these spirit medicines and pills were sold, a large number of cultivation arts and treasures were brought out, all of which were ideal for deity transformation and spatial tempering cultivators, so they created quite a stir in the entire hall. Almost every single item was competed over by hundreds of human and demonic beings, and during this time, another batch of the prominent auction items was brought out. This included a batch of over 10 vials of rising sun pills, which could enhance the magic power of body integration cultivators, as well as a jade slip containing the cultivation arts used by a renowned body integration stage cultivator who passed away tens of thousands of years ago, and 2 spirit treasures. These items naturally sent the entire venue into a frenzy, yet even up to this stage, the body integration stage beings on the 3rd floor had still barely placed bids for anything, and when one of them did place a bid, it was very rare that any of the other body integration stage beings would compete with them. It seemed that most of them were waiting for something. After the final dozen or so massive 100-foot-tall battle puppets were purchased by a certain mysterious individual for tens of millions of spirit stones, the entire auction was finally drawing to a conclusion. Heavenly Eye Disciple smiled as he cupped his fist in a salute and announced, "The next 2 auction items are the final 2 items of this auction, and also the most precious 2 items. My powers are limited, so I'm unable to host the auction for these 2 items. Hence, they'll be introduced to all of you by their original owners, Worm Monarch Li Huo, and a mysterious guest from a foreign race." After that, he extended another salute toward everyone before walking off the platform. Many of the people in the hall had also heard that foreign beings would appear during the auction, but this still created quite a stir. After all, the human and demon races definitely didn't share relationships with the nearby foreign races, and a battle between Deep Heaven City and a united foreign army had just taken place several centuries ago. As Worm Monarch Li Huo arrived on the platform with a yellow-robed woman, all of the chatter immediately died down, and everyone's eyes fell upon the elegant figure beside the red-robed Worm Monarch Li Huo. This yellow-robed woman had a round face with delicate skin and appeared to only be around 17 to 18 years of age. She wore a sweet smile and gave off a very pleasant and approachable feeling. Many people were surprised to see this so-called foreign being in her current appearance. Only those who had cultivated special spiritual sense secret techniques could use their spiritual sense to determine that there was something different about her compared to a normal human. Han Li didn't even bother to use his spiritual sense. Instead, he had opened his eyes, and blue light flashed through his pupils, immediately allowing him to glean what was amiss about this woman. A peculiar look flashed over his face, but his expression then quickly returned to normal. At this moment, Worm Monarch Li Huo suddenly began to speak. "I'm sure I require no introduction. As for the woman beside me, she is Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns of the Artifact Spirit race. I'm sure many of you have heard of her. One of these 2 final treasures was brought here by fellow Taoist Thousand Autumns from afar." Worm Monarch Li Huo's voice was a little hoarse, but it was tinged with a hint of implacable authority. The yellow-robed woman extended a curtsy before speaking in a pleasant voice. Thousand Autumns pays her respects to the fellow Taoists present. Despite her curtsy, the woman's demeanor was neither humble nor arrogant, and it didn't seem at all like she was in foreign territory. "Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns of the Artifact Spirit race. Isn't that one of the artifact spirit races for holy spirits, which are the equivalent to body integration cultivators?" So the rumors were true. A foreign being really did appear during this auction. In the instant that Worm Monarch Li Huo and Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns' voices trailed off, the entire hall erupted into commotion again. Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns didn't display any reaction to this, but Worm Monarch Li Huo's brows furrowed slightly, and he suddenly yelled, "Quiet down, everyone. Fellow Taoist Thousand Autumns' arrival was approved by all of us 3 sovereigns and 7 monarchs. As for the reason for her visit, that's something that we'll disclose to everyone following the conclusion of the auction. On this occasion, fellow Taoist Thousand Autumns has brought with her a prized treasure for this auction as a show of her race's sincerity in forging friendly relations with us. All of the spirit stones issued during this auction will go to our human and demon races." The chatter in the hall died down significantly following this announcement, and many people began to ponder what Worm Monarch Li Huo meant by this. Meanwhile, Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns smiled, and she suddenly flipped her hand over to produce a golden and silver disc, as well as a white jade slip. This first treasure is known as the Myriad Manifestation Formation Plate, and it's a divine spirit treasures on the chaotic myriad spirit roll. It's also one of the most prized treasures of our race, and we've only decided to offer it up for auction as a show of our sincerity. This formation plate can allow one to unleash 81 different types of illusionary techniques, and if one possesses sufficient magic power to unleash all 81 illusionary techniques at once and stack them on top of one another, even body integration cultivators would struggle to escape from it. However, this formation plate is also extremely taxing on the user and will most likely exhaust a normal body integration stage being's entire supply of magic power. So do exercise caution if you manage to secure this treasure. As for this second treasure, it's the blueprint for an ancient ark that our artifact spirit race purchased for a high price from a foreign race. This ark can house more than 1,000 people, and some extremely powerful formations could be inscribed upon it to make it extraordinarily fast, and also bestow upon it incredible offensive and defensive prowess, thereby making it an exceptional life-saving treasure, Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns said with a smile. Spiritual light then flashed from her fingers as she injected some of her spiritual power into the formation plate, then waved an arm gently through the air. A burst of pink light immediately surged forth from the plate, before sweeping toward everyone below the platform. All of the human and demonic beings present were startled by this, and many of them summoned protective layers of spiritual light around their bodies. However, in the next instant, they were greeted by a floral fragrance, and they were stunned to discover that vibrant, fist-sized flowers of different colors had blossomed through all the corners of the entire hall. However, some of the more powerful beings present immediately discovered that this was all part of an illusion, and they were naturally very intrigued. I haven't refined this myriad manifestation formation plate, so the illusionary technique I'm unleashing now is nowhere near as potent as it otherwise would be. On top of that, this illusionary technique is the most mundane of the 81 types Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns introduced, and even the body integration cultivators on the third floor were quite surprised to hear this. As for this blueprint, the giant ark inscribed upon it should be for a top-grade battle ark of the Iron Strap race, which once reigned supreme over our Tian Yuan continent for a time. The costs required to refine this giant ark are quite staggering, but if successful, aside from the benefits I mentioned earlier, the ark will be able to enhance the combat prowess of over 1,000 people by severalfold, so it could be a life-saving treasure for an entire sect or major family. Unfortunately, it requires a vast amount of resources to construct, so there's no way for it to be mass-produced. Otherwise, with this blueprint, the power of an entire race could be boosted significantly. Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns continued with a smile. Fellow Taoist Thousand Autumns has introduced both treasures and also displayed the power of the myriad manifestation formation plate. As for the blueprint, I've personally had it appraised and can vouch for its authenticity. I know that many of you have come here for this blueprint, but let me give you some words of caution. This battle ark is indeed extremely powerful, but the amount of resources required to construct it is completely unimaginable to the average cultivator, so I'd advise some of the less affluent fellow Taoists present against bidding for this item. Otherwise, you could spend an enormous sum to purchase this blueprint, only to find that you're unable to refine the battle ark anyway. Alright, we'll begin with the myriad manifestation formation plate. The starting price will be 80 million spirit stones, Worm Monarch Li Hu announced. There were only so many spirit treasures that were on the chaotic myriad spirit roll, and many of the deity transformation and spatial tempering cultivators present hadn't ever seen a true divine spirit treasure before. However, the starting price of 80 million immediately discouraged most of the beings on the first and second levels from making bids. They knew that this treasure was definitely going to fall into the hands of the body integration stage beings on the third floor, so they didn't bother to make any futile bids. Even the cabins on the third floor were completely silent, and no one made an initial bid. A short while later, countless streaks of light, and a series of beast-drawn carriages and flying arcs rose up from the sea of clouds before departing in all directions. One of the mundane-looking streaks of azure light vanished into the distance after just a few flashes, and Han Li flew within it with a contemplative look on his face. Hai Yueshan and Qi Lingzi naturally stood in silence behind him, carried along by the azure light. The bidding for the last two treasures had truly been a sight to behold. Several dozens of body integration cultivators had competed for the myriad manifestation formation plate, and it had fallen into the hands of Black Phoenix Monarch Zhao Guan in the end. As for the blueprint for that giant Atlas Ark, it fell into the hands of the number one true spirit family, the Long family. Han Li's eyes narrowed slightly at the thought of the Long family, and the image of a middle-aged cultivator instantly appeared in his mind. That man had stepped onto the platform to accept the blueprint for the battle arc at the conclusion of the auction, and he was the patriarch of the Long family. On top of that, he was also a late-body integration cultivator with unfathomable magic power, and an inhuman frosty aura revolving around his body, striking one with a sense of unease even just from looking at him from afar. This Long family patriarch seemed to be no less powerful than the 3 sovereigns and 7 monarchs. It was no wonder that the Long family had always been able to maintain its status as the #1 true spirit family. The Long family patriarch had been able to outbid all of the sovereigns and monarchs at the auction, and although it naturally couldn't be deduced from that alone that the Long family's wealth outstripped that of those sovereigns and monarchs, it was definitely quite telling, nonetheless. And Li couldn't help but be concerned when he thought about how he had managed to cross this powerful family. Thankfully, through his interactions with the Gu family and Yi family, he had already learned that the other true spirit families also didn't see eye to eye with the Long family. On top of that, he now had some ties with 2 of those families, and he was a body integration cultivator himself, so he didn't really have to fear them. It wasn't like the Long family patriarch would dare to gather all of the elders of the Long family to attack him at once. With that in mind, Han Li was feeling significantly less concerned. Right at this moment, a familiar voice suddenly rang out from behind him. "Please wait, fellow Taoist Han." Han Li's expression changed slightly, and the streak of azure light he was situated in really did stop. At the same time, he turned around before cupping his fist in a salute. "Greetings, brother Myriad Bone. Did you reap many rewards during the auction?" A gray cloud was flying toward Han Li at a phenomenal speed from several thousand feet away, and the man standing atop the cloud was none other than Taoist Master Myriad Bone of the White Bone Sect. "There aren't any good things to be found in an auction like that. Even with the last 2 treasures, they're well beyond my reach," Taoist Master Myriad Bone replied with a wry smile as his gray cloud arrived in front of Han Li. "Hee, my thoughts exactly. Both the Myriad Manifestation Formation Plate and Giant Atlas Arc Blueprint are most certainly beyond the reach of vagrant cultivators like us. In particular, the latter would only bring me trouble," Han Li chuckled. "Haha, I knew you were a wise individual, brother Han, not like some people who seem to have regressed in their intelligence through constant seclusion. Who in their right mind would try to compete for something so dangerous?" Taoist Master Myriad Bone guffawed. "Is there something you would like to speak to me about, brother Myriad Bone?" Han Li asked with a smile. "Of course. Did you know that the Black Realm Convention will be held in 3 days? I asked for a guidance badge for you after receiving this news. When the time comes, you can submit the badge in exchange for access to the Exchange Convention, so you won't have to try to access the convention through alternative avenues," Taoist Master Myriad Bone said as his smile faded, and he pulled something out of his sleeve before tossing it to Han Li with a flick of his wrist. Han Li caught the item before looking down at it to find that it was a black triangular badge. Aside from some simple patterns on its surface, there were no other embellishments on the badge, not even a symbol of any description. If Taoist Master Myriad Bone hadn't told him that this was a badge, he would have thought that it was a piece of scrap metal. "This is a guidance badge?" Han Li asked in a skeptical manner. "Letter 1D627, letter 1D4C7, letter 1D452, letter 1D452, letter 1D464, letter 212F. Letter 1D624, letter 2134, letter 1D62E. I understand your suspicions, fellow Taoist, but please rest assured. The guidance badges for the last Black Realm Exchange Convention were only ordinary wooden sticks. I don't know how the organizers are able to do this, but these things are indeed the only things that will grant you access to the Black Realm, so make sure you don't lose it," Taoist Master Myriad Bone cautioned. "I see. It looks like the organizers have an interesting sense of humor. You have my thanks, brother Myriad Bone," Han Li said in a slightly surprised manner. Don't mention it. I don't have any other traits that stand out among our body integration stage fellow Taoists, but I'm pretty good when it comes to gathering information. Brother Han, have you heard of a tribulation that will descend upon our 2 races within the next 1,000 years? You and I may be affected by it as well." Taoist Master Myriad Bone suddenly changed the subject as a grim look appeared on his face. "Tribulation? Are you referring to the devilish tribulation?" Han Li asked. "So you do know of this? How much do you know about it, fellow Taoist Han?" Taoist Master Myriad Bone wasn't overly surprised by this. After all of the interactions between body integration stage beings at the Myriad Treasure Convention, there were most likely very few who were still unaware of the imminent devilish tribulation. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been so many people bidding for that giant Atlas Arc blueprint, even though they were clearly biting off more than they could chew. Everyone was trying to prepare as best as they could for the upcoming tribulation. I don't know much, but I've heard that this devilish tribulation is going to be even more difficult to endure than the previous ones, Han Li replied in a grim voice. A hint of surprise appeared on Taoist Master Myriad Bone's face upon hearing this, and he cut straight to the chase. Looks like you've had access to some confidential information. In that case, I won't waste time by going around in circles. After the Black Realm Convention, would you be interested to attend a meeting with me for vagrant body integration cultivators? We want to get together and discuss how we can safely transcend this devilish tribulation. Han Li's expression remained unchanged, and he pondered this notion for a moment before suddenly asking, "Vagrant cultivators, are you referring to those in the human race?" Taoist Master Myriad Bone faltered slightly before replying, "There are only a few vagrant body integration cultivators in our human race, so there's not much point in holding a meeting. Truth be told, most of the fellow Taoists in attendance will be from the demon race. There's no need to explain anything. I have no bias against demons. I simply wanted to learn more about the premise of this meeting. Seeing as there will be demonic fellow Taoists in attendance, this meeting should be worth my while. After the Black Realm Exchange Convention, I'll attend the meeting with you," Han Li agreed without seemingly much thought. Taoist Master Myriad Bone was ecstatic to see this, and he said, "You've definitely made a wise decision, fellow Taoist." The two of them naturally weren't going to have an extended conversation in midair, so after conversing for a short while further, Taoist Master Myriad Bone took his leave, departing as a streak of gray light atop his gray cloud and quickly vanishing into the distance. Han Li looked on in the direction that he had departed in, with a contemplative look on his face. After a while, Qi Lingzi couldn't help but prompt, "Master, isn't it about time we went back as well?" "Qi Lingzi, Yueshan, I have something I need you to do. I want you to go find a certain demonic woman for me," Han Li replied without even turning his head. "Yes, master." Qi Lingzi and Hai Yueshan were both slightly taken aback to hear this, but they agreed to undertake the errand without any hesitation. "This will prove your identity to her. I'll tell you the specific contact method as well." Han Li flipped a hand over to produce half of a jade slip before tossing it toward his two disciples, then issued them some instructions through voice transmission. The two of them naturally listened intently before nodding eagerly in response. "All right, that's all. After you find her, you can come back and report to me." After that, he swept a sleeve through the air, and part of the azure light they were hovering in detached itself before enveloping Hai Yueshan and Qi Lingzi, then slowly carried them down onto the ground. Meanwhile, Han Li flew toward the Immortal Welcome Palace as a streak of azure light. After returning to the Immortal Welcome Palace, Han Li didn't immediately enter his secret chamber to continue cultivating. Instead, he pulled out his newly obtained Weeping Spirit Blood Wood and began to fiddle around with it with a contemplative look in his eyes. Tribulation transcendent substitution puppets were vastly renowned in the human race, and it was because of this that refinement methods for such puppets were quite common. In fact, they could be found in many markets, and Han Li had made sure to purchase a refinement method for such a treasure during his travels, and it was about to come in handy now. The only issue was that these puppets required a large amount of blood essence to refine, and even after being refined, they had to be nourished by more blood essence periodically, or they could lose their efficacy. Of course, compared to the potential benefits such a puppet could bring, this amount of hassle and blood essence loss wasn't a big issue. Thus, Han Li was already beginning to think of what materials he would need to refine this puppet. After a short while, an elated look appeared on his face as he realized that he already possessed all of the other materials required to refine a tribulation transcendent substitution puppet. It could be said that this was quite the coincidence. But then again, he had purchased a vast amount of materials recently, so it really wasn't any surprise that he already had the required materials on hand. Thus, he decided that he was going to refine a tribulation transcendent substitution puppet soon, and spiritual light flashed from his hand, upon which the section of wood abruptly vanished. After that, he sat in his chair with his eyes closed, and began to visualize the steps required to refine it in case anything were to go awry during the refinement process. He remained seated on the spot for a day and a night, and Hai Yueshan finally returned the next morning. As soon as he caught sight of Han Li, he immediately yelled in an urgent manner, "Master, Junior Marshal Brother Qi Lingzi is in trouble." Calm down and tell me what happened, Han Li said with a hint of surprise as he opened his eyes. All types of beings from the human and demon races gathered at the Myriad Treasure Convention, but it was actually extremely rare for something to happen in public. Han Li's calmness also soothed the urgency in Hai Yueshen's heart somewhat, and he hurriedly said in a respectful manner, "Master, we already tracked down the demonic senior that you wanted to find, but during our return trip, we suddenly ran into a woman as we were passing by a secluded corner. The woman only took a quick glance at Junior Marshal Brother Qi Lingzi before summoning a gust of strange wind that took him away." Han Li was quite surprised to hear this, and a cold look flashed through his eyes as he asked, "What did the woman look like? Did she have any distinctive features?" "She was really tall and thin with very long hair. Oh, and she had a very large azure birthmark on her forehead. She gave off this really terrifying dark aura, and she struck me with a palm to knock me out before she departed. I was brought back to consciousness by another group of cultivators who just so happened to be passing by, and I immediately rushed back after that," Hai Yueshen said with a look of resentment on his face. Han Li's heart stirred slightly upon hearing this, and he waved a hand toward Hai Yueshen. "She struck you with her palm. Come over here." "Yes, master." Hai Yueshen was slightly taken aback by this request, but he did as he was told and immediately rushed over to Han Li. After carefully inspecting Hai Yueshen's body with his spiritual sense, a hint of fury appeared on Han Li's face. "I thought so. What a vile woman. Letter 1D487, letter 1D667, letter 1D658, letter 1D4E, letter 1D500, letter 1D4E, letter 1D658, letter 1D490, letter 1D4AT. He then raised a hand and grabbed onto one of Hai Yueshen's arms. Azure light appeared between his fingers before being injected into Hai Yueshen's body in a frenzy, and moments later, a thin black thread was forcibly dragged out of his body amid the azure light. As soon as the black thread left his body, it immediately began to writhe with all its might, revealing itself to be some kind of insect. Hai Yueshen's expression naturally darkened significantly upon seeing this. "What is that? Did that woman plant that thing in me?" "HMPH, who else could it have been? This is a heart adherence thread, a rather rare spirit insect. Upon incubation, this insect is around as thick as a chopstick, but after being captured and refined using the correct method, it would gradually become thinner, and only after it shrinks down so much that it becomes invisible to the naked eye can it be considered to have been completely refined. In that form, it's completely undetectable and can catch any target off guard. Once the insect enters one's body, it would quickly make its way into the host's heart, thereby killing them, and it's very difficult to find the cause of death thereafter. This insect hasn't been completely refined yet, but it's definitely been refined for several centuries already. They sure are generous to be using it on a body refinement warrior like you," Han Li harumphed coldly. "What are her intentions? If she wanted me dead, then why didn't she kill me on the spot?" Hai Yueshen asked as he stared at the black insect in the ball of azure light with a fearful look in his eyes. "Did you say something to her before she attacked you?" Han Li suddenly asked something that seemed to be completely irrelevant. Hai Yueshen faltered momentarily before replying. "What did I say? Oh, at the time, I think I said something like, 'We live at the immortal welcome palace.' Could that be why she didn't dare to kill me right away?" "Perhaps. It's likely that she couldn't tell whether you were speaking the truth, so she decided to plant this insect in you as a test. You won't be able to detect this insect unless you truly have ties with a body integration cultivator, so you'll either be killed, or the insect will be removed, in which case your claims would be verified, and she would also be immediately alerted. As for why she didn't kill you on the spot, that's naturally because she's wary of the Myriad Treasure Convention's law-enforcing cultivators. They may not look like much, but they're certainly not just ornaments, and they wouldn't let things slide if someone were to kill you in public," Han Li replied as he appraised the black insect. Hai Yueshen was enlightened by this explanation. Right at this moment, the black insect in the azure light abruptly shuddered, and black light appeared around its body, forcibly parting the azure light and allowing it to escape. Han Li harumphed coldly before reaching out and making a grabbing motion with one hand, drawing the black thread back like a speeding arrow by exerting a burst of enormous suction force. He then rubbed his hands together, and the insect was incinerated into nothingness amid a flash of silver flames. This demonic insect did possess some power, but it was certainly no match for Han Li's flames. In the same instant that the black insect was burned into nothingness, an elderly woman was suddenly jerked awake from her meditation within the belly of a certain small mountain. This woman had a head of long gray hair and remarkably long black nails, and her face abruptly paled before she threw up a mouthful of blood essence, seemingly having been dealt some kind of heavy blow. There was an elderly man with a pair of bushy black brows seated next to her, and he hurriedly asked, "Mistress, are you all right?" "I'm fine. It's just that my heart adherence thread was killed. I'll recover after a couple of days of meditation," the elderly woman spat through gritted teeth. "I'm glad to hear that." The elderly man knew that the woman had nurtured the heart adherence thread for over 1,000 years, so there was no way that she could be fine in the wake of its destruction. But he was forced to swallow his words of concern after the woman aimed a cold glare at him. It seems that Brat wasn't lying. They really are related to one of the body integration cultivators in the immortal Welcome Palace. The woman murmured to herself with a dark expression. "How about we let that kid go? This is a body integration cultivator we're talking about. We could be in big trouble if we incur their wrath," the elderly man murmured. "Shut up. We're both already at such an old age, and we only have a single son. If we transplant the Taoist priest's inherited treasure into Minger's body, not only will the inherited spiritual power completely cure his chronic illness, it'll also give him a set of inherited secret techniques. I've seen the inherited treasure in that kid's body. The seal on its surface is very profound, so it must contain some extremely powerful cultivation arts. If Minger can obtain it, he'll definitely go a lot further on the path of cultivation than we can. If we pass up this opportunity, where else are we going to find a second cultivator of the same cultivation base with another inherited treasure?" The elderly woman rebutted in a fierce manner. "But he's got a body integration cultivator as a backer. There's no way a pair of spatial tempering cultivators like us will be a match for them." The elderly man was still quite fearful. The woman seemed to have considered the matter carefully already, and she said in a calm manner, "HMPH, this kid is only a foundation establishment cultivator with such an ordinary spiritual root. Even if he's related to a body integration cultivator, their bond definitely won't be that strong. We just have to seek out a backer of our own. Will that body integration cultivator risk offending our backers just for foundation establishment stage brat? If worse comes to worst, I'll just have to give some more of my blood to repay them." The elderly man immediately realized what she was implying. "You're saying we should go to—" "That's right. Don't forget that I also bear the Long surname, and the patriarch of the Long family is my father. We'll set off right away and go live in the immortal Welcome Palace that the Long family is situated in for a while," the woman decided. The elderly man was clearly more logical, and he wore a wry smile as he urged. "But according to the rules of the Long family, once a female member of the family marries someone outside of the family, they'll no longer be considered as part of the Long family. Otherwise, your father wouldn't have left us to our own devices for so many years. I think we should give up on this, mistress." The woman gritted her teeth and replied, "Indeed, the women of our Long family are unable to activate true dragon blood, so we're naturally not held in high regard, but don't forget that Minger has the bloodline of the Long family. On top of that, we verified that he has true dragon blood flowing through his veins. The bloodline is a little thin, but if we tell my brother about this, he won't do nothing about it." "Mistress, didn't we agree not to tell your Long family about Minger's true dragon bloodline? Have you changed your mind again?" The elderly man's expression darkened upon hearing this. The woman was silent for a moment before speaking again in a cold voice. "I know that you want Minger to become the heir of the Li family, so you don't want him to return to the Long family, but the current situation simply won't allow for that. If we don't do anything, Minger will only be able to live for a few centuries at most. Can you really bear to see that happen?" The elderly man had no response to this. The woman's expression softened slightly at the sight of the dejected look on her Tao companion's face, and she consoled, "Fear not, everything isn't set in stone yet. Don't mention that kid to my brother yet. If that body integration cultivator doesn't come to find us, then that means that this kid doesn't mean much to him. We can just sneak away from the Long family following the conclusion of the Myriad Treasure Convention in that case. If that does happen to be the case, perhaps we won't have to leave Minger's side after all. There's no need to mollycoddle me with lies, mistress. After all, Minger's true dragon bloodline has already been activated. There's no way we'll be able to fool your brother," the man said with a forlorn shake of his head. The woman could only fall silent upon hearing this. After a long silence, the man gritted his teeth and decided, "All right, we'll do as you say. For the sake of Minger's future, he can go back to the Long family. Minger possesses the true dragon bloodline, so it'll definitely be much better for him to go back to the Long family than to stay with us." The woman was ecstatic to hear this. You've definitely made the right decision. From what I've heard, there aren't that many people in this generation of the Long family who have activated their true dragon bloodlines, so Minger will definitely be held in very high regard once he goes back. Having made that decision, the two of them made no effort to delay and immediately sprang into action. The woman quickly passed through a corridor and arrived in a room with simple decor. Within this room was a white-robed young man with a slightly sickly pallor, and he was seated beside a stone table, reading a shimmering silver book with rapt focus. The young man immediately put down the book at the sight of the woman and smiled as he asked, "Mother, would you like something from me?" "Minger, pack up your stuff. We're going to the Long family's immortal welcome palace right away." In the face of her beloved son, the dark and stern expression on the woman's face had completely disappeared, replaced by one of doting compassion. "The Long family. Looks like the guy you captured wasn't an easy target after all," the young man said in a resigned manner as his brows furrowed slightly. "How did you know about this?" The woman was rather taken aback. "Don't forget that even though I don't possess exceptional magic power, I've already activated my true dragon bloodline, which has granted me much better hearing. Even though I haven't left my room, I was still able to overhear some of your conversation," the young man explained. "I see. Don't worry, Minger. Your father and I will extract that man's inherited treasure and transplant it into your body no matter what. Not only will your chronic condition be cured as a result, you'll also be able to use that inherited spiritual power to break through a bottleneck, and there's a good chance you'll reach the core formation stage right away. As for that kid's backers, there's no way he would dare to cross the Long family," the elderly woman consoled. The young man was silent for a moment before heaving a faint sigh. "Ever since this treatment method of transplanting an inherited treasure into my body was proposed, you and father have constantly been searching for cultivators with inherited treasures that have yet to have their seals broken. I always had a feeling that this would lead to quite a bit of trouble. Now that we've finally found one, I presume you wouldn't be willing to let him go even if I were to try and persuade you, right, mother?" "What nonsense are you spouting? Your father and I only made the decision to have you as there's no way we can transcend our next major heavenly tribulations. We're not going to let you pass away ahead of us no matter what. As long as that kid's backer isn't one of the 3 sovereigns or 7 monarchs, your uncle and grandfather will definitely be able to protect you. Besides, you've activated your true dragon bloodline now, so you're automatically a member of the Long family. If the Long family doesn't protect you, then how can they still be known as the #1 true spirit family?" The elderly woman's expression had darkened slightly again, and his voice was filled with hints of resentment. "All right then, seeing as the decision has already been made, let's get out of here right away. That body integration cultivator may get here very quickly," the young man urged as he shook his head in resignation. The woman was rather surprised to hear this, following which a skeptical look appeared on her face. "Surely not. I've already examined that kid's body, and no marks were left within him." "You're not a body integration cultivator, after all, mother. According to my knowledge, body integration cultivators have at least 3 or 4 types of methods through which they can plant spiritual sense marks without being detected by the spiritual sense of a spatial tempering cultivator. I may not have been able to cultivate my magic power during these past years, but I haven't been reading all of these tomes for nothing," the young man said with a wry smile. A nervous look appeared on the woman's face upon hearing this. "You're right, then let's just get out of here right away. Forget about packing your stuff. Your father is already going to retrieve that kid." Meanwhile, the elderly man was standing in a secret chamber, appraising an unconscious person on the ground with a complex look in his eyes. "Don't blame us for being cruel and inhumane, Taoist priest. If we want to cure our son, then our only option would be to take your inherited treasure. Without your inherited treasure, you'll be completely unable to cultivate, which is a fate that I'm sure will be worse than death for you, so I'll send you on your way in a painless fashion." A sinister look appeared on his face as he spoke. The man lying on the ground was naturally none other than Xianxia. The elderly man flipped a hand over, and black light flashed between his fingers, upon which an inky black talisman appeared. He flicked his wrist, and the talisman immediately flew forth as a streak of gray light before vanishing into Xianxia's body in a flash. He then opened his mouth to expel a ball of black qi, within which was a rotating azure copper bell. He raised a hand before gently flicking a finger, and a crisp chime rang out from within the black qi. A peculiar scene then ensued. Xianxia's body suddenly shuddered before he got up on his own to face the elderly man in a standing position with his eyes still tightly shut. He was completely expressionless like a puppet, and the elderly man chanted something as he flicked one incantation seal through the air after another, and the azure bell immediately let loose a string of chimes of different durations. Amid the seemingly ordinary bell chimes, Qi Lingzi slowly opened his eyes. They were completely glazed over at first before gradually gaining a hint of clarity, but they were still completely devoid of emotion. The elderly man heaved a long sigh of relief upon seeing this, and he made a grabbing motion to withdraw the bell into his sleeve before turning to leave. Faint bell chimes were still ringing out from within his sleeve, and Qi Lingzi followed him out of the room in a wooden and rigid manner. A short while later, two streaks of light, one black and one gray, flew out of the small mountain before heading directly toward Immortal Mountain. These two streaks of light contained both Qi Lingzi and the sickly young man, and after just a few flashes, they both vanished into the distance. After an indeterminate period of time, a streak of azure light shot forth from another direction, quickly arriving at the small mountain. The azure light then faded to reveal two men, one of whom was very handsome, while the other was completely mundane in appearance. They were none other than Hai Yueshan and Han Li. Han Li swept his spiritual sense through the small mountain before a hint of surprise appeared on his face. "They're not here anymore." "What, they took him somewhere else? Will you still be able to track them down, Master?" Hai Yueshan asked in a nervous manner. "Don't worry, the spiritual sense mark that I planted in Qi Lingzi's body is extremely feeble, but it'll periodically send me a strong signal that will alert me to his location," Han Li replied in a calm voice. "Thank heavens, those people really are brazen to the extreme. How dare they abduct someone in broad daylight at the Myriad Treasure Convention? Why didn't the law-enforcing cultivators do anything?" Hai Yueshan's expression eased slightly initially before an enraged look resurfaced in his eyes. If a normal cultivator had done something like this, law-enforcing cultivators would have definitely stepped in. But if someone of the spatial tempering stage had been behind this, then the law-enforcing cultivators would have to have second thoughts. If a body integration cultivator had been sighted abducting someone, the law-enforcing cultivators would most likely scrub their eyes clean and immediately turn away. Han Li chuckled coldly. "Does that mean that old woman is a body integration cultivator?" Hai Yueshan's expression changed drastically upon hearing this. "Most likely not. If she were a body integration cultivator as well, she wouldn't be fleeing from me like this," Han Li replied with a shake of his head. "That's true," Hai Yueshan said with a nod. Thus the two of them waited for around an hour, following which Han Li abruptly turned toward a certain direction. "I've found them. They're heading toward Immortal Mountain. Let's go." Before Hai Yueshan had a chance to respond, he was swept up by a burst of azure light, and the two of them flew through the air again, traveling toward Immortal Mountain on this occasion. 6 hours later, Han Li and Hai Yueshan appeared surreptitiously in the air above a massive, luxurious palace. The palace was split up into 10 levels, and it was none other than one of the 9 immortal welcome palaces. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly as he appraised the palace with a dark look in his eyes. "Master, have we come to the wrong place? Has Qi Lingzi really been taken here?" Hai Yueshan asked in a strained voice as his face paled slightly. It was quite clear that he understood what it entailed for Qi Lingzi to appear here. "There's no mistaking it. At such a close range, these restrictions aren't enough to obstruct my spiritual sense at all," Han Li replied in a grim manner. "Could it be that that old woman really is a body integration cultivator? But if that's the case, why was junior martial brother Qi Lingzi outside of Immortal Mountain to begin with?" Hai Yueshan murmured. "It's very simple. If that old woman really is a body integration cultivator, then that cave abode outside Immortal Mountain would only be a temporary one where she takes care of private matters without having to worry about being seen. Otherwise, she's not a body integration cultivator, but has ties with a certain body integration cultivator living here. In the latter case, she must have sought out this backer in order to scare us away," Han Li analyzed in a calm manner. Hai Yueshan hesitated for a long while before asking, "What should we do then, Master?" "You go down first and find out for me who is living on the 9th floor of this palace," Han Li instructed. "Yes, Master." Hai Yueshan was encouraged by Han Li's calm demeanor, and he immediately extended a respectful salute. "I'll send you down there. After you find out the information I requested, go to the nearest hill over there to find me," Han Li continued before sweeping a sleeve through the air, upon which a ball of azure light immediately detached itself before carrying Hai Yueshan safely down onto the ground. Meanwhile, he turned and flew toward a hill that was several tens of kilometers away. Nearest hill. Even though Nine Immortal Mountain was comprised of the 9 massive peaks, there were naturally some nameless and unimportant mountains and hills littered throughout the mountain range. After landing on the ground, Hai Yueshan cast a glance toward the Immortal Welcome Palace, but didn't immediately make his way toward it. Instead, he took a deep breath before rushing toward the most lively and bustling place near the palace. With Hai Yueshan's easygoing and extroverted personality, he was quickly able to learn who was inhabiting the 9th floor of the Immortal Welcome Palace after asking around in the busy market. The answer that he received immediately made him draw a sharp breath, but his expression remained unchanged as he hurriedly departed. What, the Long family? Han Li seemed to be truly taken aback by this. Indeed, I've already verified that not only are the Long family patriarch and some of their guest elders living on the 9th floor, even the current Long family leader and their spatial tempering stage elders are all there as well, Hai Yueshan replied with a concerned expression. That is indeed rather troublesome, but that's not the main issue, Han Li said as he narrowed his eyes slightly. What do you mean, master? Hai Yueshan was rather perplexed by this. The main issue is that I'm not on good terms with the Long family. If we were facing a normal body integration cultivator, I could pay them a direct visit to recover your junior martial brother. Generally speaking, unless they're completely desperate, they wouldn't want to cross another body integration cultivator like me. However, the fact that the Long family is concerned makes things a lot more complicated, Han Li explained in a cold voice. Hai Yueshan's expression changed drastically upon hearing this. However, that doesn't mean I can't recover your junior martial brother. I've already crossed the Long family once, so what'll it matter if I do it again? Besides, they may not detect me anyway. Yueshan, you go back to our Immortal Welcome Palace on your own. I'll return to join you soon. Han Li chuckled coldly as bright azure light suddenly erupted from his body, and he abruptly vanished on the spot. Hai Yueshan could naturally tell what Han Li was implying, and he was both surprised and elated by what he had heard. Thus, he immediately extended a respectful salute, even though Han Li was no longer anywhere to be seen, then rushed down the hill. A distance of several tens of kilometers was naturally covered in the blink of an eye for Han Li, and he reappeared in the air around half a kilometer away from the Immortal Welcome Palace. He looked on at the 9th level of the giant palace, and the image of a massive formation blueprint surfaced in his mind. The 9 Immortal Welcome Palaces were situated in different places, but according to his observation, the formations set up within them should all be quite similar. These restrictions were indeed extremely intricate and profound, but with so many powerful abilities up his sleeve, it certainly wouldn't be impossible to infiltrate this place without being detected. With that in mind, he pondered the situation for a moment before suddenly flipping a hand over to produce a shimmering silver piece of thin fabric. This was none other than the 1,000 transformation faces he had obtained from Liu Shuyer in the vast glacial realm. This was quite an extraordinary treasure, and Liu Shuyer didn't have the heart to ask Han Li to return it after he had saved her, and she Kunz lives in the dark beast forest, so it had remained with Han Li thereafter. Immediately tossed the 1,000 transformation faces forward before flicking his wrist, and a ball of azure light flashed from his storage bracelet, upon which a furry piece of golden beasthide was also tossed forward. Letter 1D4F, letter 1D4FB, letter 1D4E, letter 1D65A, letter 1D66C, letter 1D4E, letter 1D48F, letter 1D484, letter 1D490, letter 1D4F6. He then made a hand seal before pointing at the 2 items one after the other, and the 1,000 transformation faces shuddered slightly before vanishing into the section of beasthide as a ball of silver light. The golden beasthide rotated on the spot before suddenly hurtling toward Han Li, then vanished in a flash. At the same time, a low roar erupted from Han Li's mouth, and his face abruptly underwent a drastic transformation. A layer of long golden fur suddenly sprouted from his smooth skin, concealing his original facial features. At the same time, blue light flashed from his eyes, and his pupils turned into a deep blue color. He was giving off an indescribably ferocious aura, and he stroked the golden fur on his own face as he murmured to himself. As expected, the beasthide of this golden arm ape really does work. I should be able to fool the members of the Long family now. He then took a deep breath, and black light flashed as 2 pieces of black veil suddenly appeared over his body. The 2 pieces of veil rotated around him, before flying toward his body as 2 streaks of black light. In the next instant, Han Li's body gradually became blurry and indistinct within the black light, before finally completely disappearing out of sight. Han Li looked down at his own body, which seemed to have turned completely transparent, and he nodded with a pleased look in his eyes. Of course, using the high zenith invisibility talisman would result in a superior concealment effect, but if he were to use that talisman, it would be difficult for him to unleash his abilities to break the restrictions he would have to face, so he could only settle for something else. Thus, Han Li flew directly toward the 9th level of the palace up ahead, and he quickly reached his target. All of a sudden, white light flashed, and a white light barrier appeared before him. Its surface flashed with lightning, and several arcs of electricity began to emerge. Han Li's expression remained completely unchanged, as he extended a hand out of his sleeve before spreading his fingers, blasting forth several arcs of golden lightning in retaliation. As soon as the silver arcs of lightning hurtled toward Han Li, they were instantly nullified by the golden lightning in a completely soundless manner. At the same time, a layer of gray light appeared around Han Li's body, and he passed through the white light barrier as if it didn't even exist. A human-shaped hole appeared in the white light barrier, but Han Li was still nowhere to be seen. The hole then rapidly sealed at a rate that was discernible to the naked eye and returned to normal in an instant, following which the light barrier itself also quickly vanished. Moments later, 2 deity transformation stage guards flew out of the first floor of the immortal welcome place. They then rose up into the air, straight toward the same spot that Han Li had just infiltrated through. One of the 2 guards, a young man who appeared to be around 17 to 18 years of age, inspected the surrounding area before murmuring to himself in a perplexed manner. "I'm sure the restriction fluctuations from just now came from here, but there doesn't seem to be anything amiss." His companion was a thin elderly man with a goatee and short horns, and he suggested, perhaps it was only a bird that crashed into the restriction. Otherwise, the reaction wouldn't have been so feeble. The latter of the 2 was a demonic cultivator. "Surely you jest, Brother Gongsun. If even a bird can draw a reaction out of the immortal Welcome Palace's restriction, then the restriction master responsible for this restriction should seriously reevaluate their craft." The young man scoffed with furrowed brows. If it's not a bird, then it could be a spirit beast that strayed away from a nearby market, or perhaps a body integration stage senior unintentionally set off the restriction somehow. In any case, what are we going to be able to do about it? Forgive me for being blunt, but if someone really has infiltrated the immortal Welcome Palace, they're definitely here to challenge a certain body integration stage senior. Do you think that's something that we can stick our noses into? The demonic elderly man chuckled. The young man contemplated this notion for a while before suddenly smiling as he said, "You're right, fellow Taoist Gongsun. Seeing as the restriction here hasn't been damaged, it really would be unbecoming of us to take this matter too seriously." "Haha, I knew you were smart, man. I have a flagon of exceptional spirit wine. Why don't we enjoy it together?" A wide smile also appeared on the elderly man's face now that the young man had given up on the investigation. Thus, the 2 of them descended like a pair of good friends, paying no further heed to the restriction behind them. Elsewhere, a ball of silver flames emerged, then surged forth to incinerate a series of threads of light into nothingness. Immediately thereafter, Han Li appeared in front of a certain wall on the 9th floor. He cast his gaze toward the pristine white wall up ahead to find a series of silver runes of different sizes shimmering incessantly on its surface, presenting quite a mysterious sight to behold. A grim expression appeared on Han Li's face. These weren't just normal runes. Instead, they were the manifestation of a type of spatial restriction placed on this wall, which would render it immune to the effects of normal secret techniques and cultivation arts. Thankfully, he also possessed some spatial abilities, so it wouldn't be too difficult for him to bypass this wall. With that in mind, Han Li made a hand seal, and a ball of black light suddenly appeared on his glabella. A gash then split open on his forehead, following which a black demonic eye emerged. The demonic eye seemed to aim a glance at the wall before blasting forth a burst of black light toward it. A peculiar scene then ensued. In the instant that the black light came into contact with the white wall, the nearby silver runes suddenly faded into obscurity. Han Li let loose a low cry, and the beam of black light, which was around as thick as a human finger, abruptly became noticeably thicker. The white wall up ahead shuddered, and a small black hole that was around a foot in size was punched into it. A cold light flashed through Han Li's eyes, and the black light being emitted from his demonic eye was withdrawn, following which he flew into the black hole, and in the next instant the hole vanished. Han Li emerged on the other side and found himself situated within a forest, standing right beneath a huge tree. What left him feeling quite awkward was that there was a middle-aged man and a beautiful young woman staring at him with incredulous looks in their eyes from less than 10 feet away. And Lee naturally, immediately reacted, heaving a faint sigh as he suddenly lashed out with both of his arms. Two loud smacks rang out, as his arms suddenly elongated to several times their original length, striking the two people in the room and sending them crumpling to the ground amid a dull thump. These two were only at the core formation stage and foundation establishment stage, so he didn't kill them. He merely injected a wisp of his magic power into their spiritual sense to knock them out. After that, Han Li made a grabbing motion toward the middle-aged man, and he was instantly drawn into Han Li's grasp. Azure light flashed from Han Li's face, and he immediately unleashed a soul search technique. After a short while, Han Li's darkened slightly, and he released the man before grabbing the woman and unleashing the same technique on her. After releasing her as well, he murmured to himself, "So Qi Lingzi really was brought to the Long family, and that woman is the sister of the Long family leader. It's a pity that some of the secrets in the memories of these two were concealed by some secret techniques, so I can only glean very limited information from them." A slightly wistful look appeared on Han Li's face as he spoke. It wasn't a strange thing that secret techniques had been placed on the memories of these two. All major families would take the same precautionary measures with their core members in case of this exact situation. However, the matters surrounding that woman clearly weren't supposed to be confidential information, so Han Li was able to glean it with ease. Not long ago, a woman that matched the description provided by Hai Yueshan had taken 3 other people to this place, and after having a conversation with the Long family leader, they were taken away to rest. One of those 3 other people was none other than Qi Lingzi. However, these two were unaware of where the 4 of them currently were. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly as he looked at the 2 unconscious people before him, and he suddenly stomped his foot onto the ground. A burst of yellow light surged forth, and a pit that was around 10 feet in depth silently appeared. He then swept a sleeve through the air, sending forth a burst of azure light that picked up the 2 before gently laying them into the pit. After that, Han Li made a hand seal before pointing a finger at the pit, and a burst of yellow light suddenly erupted from it. Following just a single flash, the pit vanished, and the ground returned to normal with no visible signs at all of what had just transpired. Only then did Han Li cast his gaze out of the forest, and he discovered that this level was indeed different from the one he was living in. Outside the forest was a vast expanse of murky white mist, within which the outlines of a city wall could just barely be made out. Blue light flashed through Han Li's eyes, and his body swayed as a layer of gray light appeared around him. This mist was clearly some type of profound restriction, and part of it fused with the gray light around Han Li, making him appear quite blurry and indistinct as well. After only advancing for just over 1,000 feet, Han Li reached the edge of the mist, and he discovered that a golden fortress surrounded by walls that were over 100 feet tall lay up ahead, not too far in the distance. There was a series of white-robed cultivators that either had swords or sabers strapped to their backs standing atop the city walls, and beyond the walls were many buildings and pavilions. At the very center of the fortress was a giant golden tower that was several thousand feet tall. Han Li wasn't concerned that these white-robed cultivators would be able to see him, and he cast his gaze directly toward the golden tower. According to the information he had just gleaned from those 2 members of the Long family, the tower was inhabited by the late body integration stage Long family patriarch, as well as the family's spatial tempering stage elders. However, right after the Long family patriarch secured that giant Atlas Arc blueprint from the auction, he immediately went into seclusion in the tower with several of the formation and tool refinement masters of the family to study the blueprint. As for the other body integration stage Grand Elder, he seemed to have some matters to attend to and recently left the Immortal Welcome Palace. As such, there really was next to no risk of Han Li being discovered. As long as that Long family patriarch didn't suddenly sweep his spiritual sense through the entire fortress for no reason, there was no one else here who could detect him. With that in mind, Han Li didn't hesitate any longer. Black light surged around his body, and he flew directly toward a certain section of the city wall. One of the white-robed cultivators on the city wall suddenly felt a faint breeze blow past him, and he immediately released his spiritual sense while inspecting his surroundings, but didn't discover anything. Letter 1D65B, letter 1D4F, B, letter 1D486, letter 1D4E, letter 1D498, letter 1D65A. Letter 1D4 EC, letter 1D490, letter 1D662. A hint of confusion flashed through his eyes, but he then shook his head and seemed to have convinced himself that the breeze had merely been a figment of his imagination. Unbeknownst to him, an outsider had just passed him by and landed on a pristine white street on the other side of the city wall. However, strangely enough, he had his eyes closed and stood on the street in a completely still manner, as if he were trying to sense something. After a while, he opened his eyes, and a dark expression appeared on his face. I can't sense him anymore. Looks like someone must have stepped in to conceal my spiritual sense mark. In that case, I'll have to search through these rooms one by one. It's a good thing that this place isn't all that big, and there aren't that many spatial tempering cultivators here, so I should be able to track them down quite quickly. After that, Han Li drifted forward as an invisible breeze, before vanishing into a certain pavilion. Meanwhile, the elderly woman and the others were seated in a pavilion that was extremely far away from Han Li. They had been joined by a purple-robed elderly man who had just placed a crescent-shaped jade pendant around Qi Lingzi's neck, and he said, "This piece of Moonheart jade is extremely effective for keeping out one's spiritual sense, so that person won't be able to sense him unless he's extremely close. You can rest easy now." "Thank you for your kindness, brother." The elderly woman extended a grateful curtsy toward the purple-robed man. Her Dao companion also wore a grateful smile, while their son remained quite calm and collected. "You two sure are bold to be crossing a body integration cultivator. If it's not for the fact that Ming'er has activated the true dragon bloodline, I wouldn't have accepted you no matter what. Even if you're my sister, no exceptions can be made for you. On top of that, you're prohibited from doing anything to that Taoist priest before our father comes out of seclusion. I don't think there's any issue with this, but it does concern a body integration cultivator after all, so I have to consult father first. If you go against this, then don't blame me for abandoning you," the purple-robed man warned in a stern manner. "Of course, I haven't seen father in many years as well, and I want to see him one final time. My Dao companion and I most likely won't be able to transcend our next major heavenly tribulations, so I'll have to entrust Ming'er to you, brother." Thankfully, Ming'er's aptitude should be comparable to that of the other young talents of the Long family after his chronic condition is cured, so he'll definitely be a bright prospect, the elderly woman said with a slightly forced smile and a forlorn look in her eyes. "You can rest assured and leave Ming'er to me. As for meeting father, I'm not sure that can be arranged. As you know, the women of our family who insist on marrying someone outside of the family are essentially disowned. On top of that, our father is using the vastly renowned heartless Dao cultivation art, so there's no way that he'll want to see you again. After everything is taken care of here, you two can leave," the purple-robed man said with a shake of his head, and the woman was quite disappointed to hear this. Her expression soured even further, and she still wanted to implore her brother to arrange an opportunity for her to meet their father, but the purple-robed man waved a dismissive hand and departed before she could say anything. Thus, the only ones left in her room were her family of 3 and Qi Lingzi. The woman was silent for a long while before speaking in a resentful voice. "Looks like we'll have to do as he says. Take this Taoist priest to the secret chamber." "There's no need to be sad, mistress. We predicted that all of this would happen, didn't we? It's already very fortunate for us that your brother didn't reject us even though this matter concerns a body integration cultivator," the elderly man consoled with a wry smile on his face. "I don't need you to tell me that. Hurry up and take the Taoist priest away." The woman clearly wasn't in any mood to listen to reason. The man heaved a faint sigh and could only fall silent as he made his way over to Qi Lingzi. "We'll let you keep your inherited treasure for a few more days, kid. It won't be long until your inherited treasure belongs to our Ming'er. No one will be able to stop us." He flipped a hand over to produce the same azure copper bell as he spoke, and Qi Lingzi continued to stand on the spot like a wooden puppet. Just as the elderly man was about to shake the bell in his hand, a cold male voice suddenly rang out in the room. "No one can stop you. What about me?" "He's here," the elderly man exclaimed as he immediately hurled his bell through the air, and it instantly expanded to an enormous size before trapping Qi Lingzi inside. His Dao companion also reacted very quickly as her expression changed drastically, and she swept a sleeve through the air to send 2 streaks of black light hurtling through the air at once. One streak of light transformed into a vast expanse of black light that swept up her son before bringing him to her side, while the other streak of light transformed into a horned black python, which expelled black lotus flowers out of its mouth to form a protective barrier around the woman and her son. Meanwhile, the woman herself took a deep breath before letting loose a shrill shriek, but her efforts were only met by a cold chuckle of disdain. Spatial fluctuations suddenly erupted in the air above the giant bell, and a furry golden fist suddenly emerged out of thin air before gently striking the bell. A resounding boom rang out, and azure runes only managed to appear for a split second on the surface of the bell before it was shattered with ease and vanished as a ball of azure light. The golden hand then hurtled toward the elderly man with a palm, and though it didn't seem to be imbued with any significant power, the elderly man was sent flying like a rucksack while letting loose an agonized cry. Almost at the exact same moment, another huge golden hand appeared out of thin air in front of the elderly woman before grabbing toward her like lightning. The protective spiritual light and black lotus flowers around her were instantly torn apart, and the golden hand closed itself around her neck before lifting her off the ground. Her shrill shriek was immediately cut off, and her eyes began to roll into the back of her head.